How's my audio? I'm just gonna test it real quick. How's my audio? Oh, sounds good. So, so, all right. How are you all doing today? I want to just say happy Thursday. This is the Thursday we've been waiting for a long time. Thursday is the day that the Supreme Court likes to announce their opinions. That's just, for some reason, Thursday is just a beautiful day. Sometimes they do Fridays as well, but usually it's on a Thursday. And today, today, a very important case came down. Before we talk about that case, I'm going to prime you guys a little bit. I'm going to talk about a few things that I brought up in the last affirmative action debate because you're going to see some familiarities here. Okay, some oh shit, I've seen that before. Uh, the first thing I want to talk about is affirmative action, at least how it was before today, is an often misunderstood thing. Okay? Most people don't fully get what it was supposed to do, what it was supposed to mean, and how much of an effect it has, what's the theory behind it, et cetera, et cetera. So to briefly explain, essentially, here is the history of affirmative action in a nutshell. Okay? Uh, there was a case, very famous case, involving a man named Alan Bakke. Okay, Alan Bakke. You're going to hear the Bakke case. That is one of the first cases. Sorry, pretty much the first case that dealt with affirmative action. And at the time of Mr. Bakke, we had a situation in which multiple universities had a quota system. And how the quota system worked is they were upset about racism. That racism had been around. So, in order to remedy that racism, what they decided they were going to do is leave a certain number of seats specifically for minorities, which in the context of that day meant black people. Okay? Um, Alan Bakke was a very impressive student, and he applied twice. Actually, it escapes me the University of California, UC, that's right. And he applied twice, and he was rejected twice. And then he sued, saying, "Hey, this is bullshit. My scores, my academics, my credentials, my experience, my background, everything is a lot better than a lot of these minority students that you're letting into the quoted uh, uh, seats." Just my camera real quick. So he's pissed, and the Supreme Court is put in a very difficult situation where they want to be, uh, woke and racially conscious, but at the same time, the 14th Amendment's pretty clear that if you're the government, you can't do this shit, right? If you're the government, you cannot treat different racial groups differently under the law. And at public universities, this is a problem, right? Like at the University of California, or as we're going to hear about today, the University of North Carolina. Um, and so he sued, and the Supreme Court decided in that case, you know what? By the way, it was a plurality decision. There was no majority decision. It was very, very. There was actually some debate about whether or not the one of the writers for the uh, for specifically, why am I forgetting the word? Plu Oh, my brain, plurality. For some reason, I wanted to keep saying plutocracy. Plur. I'm not drunk at all. Uh, plurality. Plurality. So the plurality decision there was, you can discriminate racially, but you can't do the quotas, right? That was just what they decided. Look, you got strict scrutiny here. You got to be. This is very odorous way of discriminating. You got to be very careful. Um, this is water. This is water. I'm only on water today. It's been a long day, but we're gonna make it. So the plurality decided no quotas, but yes, you can racially discriminate. There was some question about whether or not that actually was standing law and how that applied. But that was resolved in a 2003 case called Grutter versus Bollinger, which basically said, "Hey, that one Bakke case, yeah, that's good. You can discriminate, just can't have quotas." And then the Fisher case, you guys recall Abigail Fisher? She applied to the University of Texas and she got denied. And the Supreme Court then ruled, yeah, in the Fisher case, the University of Texas, they can take race into consideration. The critical point here, though, and this is the case, and this is important because it's going to come up when we look at the dissent in today's case. The critical element was in Bakke, in Bollinger, in Fisher, every single case, the Supreme Court said you cannot racially discriminate when it comes to rectifying some kind of societal injustice, right? You cannot justify affirmative action based on slavery, on Jim Crow. You cannot justify it based on racism that occurs to black people every day. You can't justify it on any of that. You can only justify affirmative action on the interest a university may have in a diverse student body. That's it. And in fact, since then, they've made it before today, but since Bakke, they have made it very clear that race can't be the only thing, right? If you're looking for a very holistic, diverse, well-rounded group of students, you can use race, but really, like, we want you to do this in the name of diversity, not in the name of justice. So you can't use just race, and your interests are limited to just diversity. This isn't shaming white people. Oh, and by the way, on top of that, you can only do affirmative action in a way that you give points to somebody because of their race. You can't punish somebody because of their race. You can't take away points or shame somebody. There can't be like a white person or Asian person negative that comes with affirmative action. Well, what we started seeing is obviously universities discriminating based on race because they were told they could. And the universities hide that data constantly. They don't want people to see the full admissions data that they have. And they don't want people to see exactly how they do admissions. Because, as it turns out, it's pretty bad. And because Harvard got sued, they had to release some data on their admissions. And there was an analysis done of this data. We're going to talk a little bit about this analysis first before we go into the actual case. All right. So this is an analysis by the National Bureau of Economic Research, which took the data from the Students for Fair Admissions, SFFA, the same plaintiff in the case today, which is a advocacy group that focuses on advocating for, as is in the name, for fair admissions. They're an anti-affirmative action advocacy group. The National Bureau of Economic Research took the data and did a whole bunch of analysis on it. This paper is linked in my Discord. I'm going to go ahead and link it right here in the Twitch chat as well. All right, this is in the Twitch chat. So this is Harvard, the same one of the schools that lost in today's opinion. And basically, the methodology, there's a lot of methodology here, but there's a specific table. If I can find it. Here. There's a specific table that shows how pervasive this was. So table 11. I'm going to explain this table a little bit. It's important. So total admits by race under different admissions policies, expanded sample. What they did is they took the admissions policy of Harvard in 2019, and this is what would have come out, okay? Of all of the thousands and thousands of people who apply to Harvard, the model would indicate that 4,802 white people would get in, 1,367 black people would get in, 1,365 Hispanic people would get in, 1,367, I'll make that clear, I didn't say 13,000. And then 2,358 Asian Americans would get in. And then they start doing some fun stuff. Okay, they start applying, well, what if they didn't take into account legacy? And you might wonder, well, how are they able to control for that? Well, the reason is because Harvard, as with the University of North Carolina, once they went through all the essays and the testing and the interviews, they got a big pile of students that they were like, okay, we're going to go ahead and let them in, but we're going to apply we're going to apply 4 things to find out who actually gets in. And the 4 things are legacy, athletics, race, and student aid applicability. So we actually know with reasonable certainty who was cut and why, right? Once the final pool comes in, well, the semifinal pool comes in, who they cut based on each of these preferences. And they explicitly use race because this was allowed. A lot of hoopla is being given to legacy and athletics. Well, we can look at what would happen if the university did not take legacy into account whatsoever. Just legacy. They still took athletics and they still took race into account. What if they didn't take legacy into account? Well, the number of white admits goes from 4,802 to 4,598, a drop of about 200 people, about 204 exactly. So 204 white people got in specifically because of legacy. And if there's no legacy, more black people come in. It's true. It goes from 1367 to 1423. So we have an increase of, oh boy, what, 50 roughly? Maybe a little bit less. Hispanic numbers go up as well, roughly the same amount, 50, 60. And Asian American numbers go up about 100, exactly 100. So legacy benefits white people. It's absolutely true. Now, what we're going to do now we're going to go ahead and calculate some things here. Okay. So less than 5% of white people get in because of legacy. 4.8%. 4.8%. That's what legacy does for white people. 4.8%. Relatively nothing. 4.8%. Relatively nothing. Does legacy help white people? Yes. 4.8% of white people would have not gotten into Harvard if they didn't have the legacy bonus. 4. It's a little bit more than 4%, a little bit less than 5. Number, I would argue, irrelevant. Okay, well, let's look at athletics. Well, if you remove athletics, wow, athletics actually helps white people even more than legacy does by about 100, so about 300. Well, let's do that math too. I don't want to go through actually all the math. That's boring. So it's not a lot, if you can tell. Maybe 10%, less than 10%, 5% for 200, 300, 8%. Most is we can estimate 8%. You can go higher, 9 if you want. And then if you remove race from the calculation and legacy and athletics, white admittance goes up by over 100, by 145. More white people get in. So yes, you remove legacy, you remove athletics, you remove race, more white people get in. So this legacy and the athletics does not outweigh the racial element for white people at least. But the numbers for white people actually aren't all that different, right? 48, 46 roughly, 45 roughly, 49. It's all in the upper 4,000s. Why don't they just remove race? I don't know, but I would prefer they did as well. But they didn't. I assume it wouldn't have been relevant for specific data they were trying to get. But regardless, for our purposes, it doesn't matter. We can just go off of this because it proves my point regardless. Now, look at what happens. Let's ignore these two for the moment because we already showed that legacy and athletics really helps mostly white people and Hispanics. And actually, no, it does not help Hispanics, sorry. It mostly helps white people. But if you remove race, legacy, and athletics, we see the number of white people go up. But look at the number of black admins. It goes from 1367 to 428. This I am going to calculate real quick for us. %. That means that if you took out race, legacy, and athletic preference, only 31% of black Harvard admits get in. 31%, less than a third. More than 2/3 of black admits to Harvard would not have gotten in if their race wasn't considered. That's it. Even when you remove legacy, even when you remove athletics, and you remove racial calculation, less than a third. And look at the Asian number. The Asian number goes up by 1,000, by about a third, roughly. Maybe a little bit more. So we see the number of Asians goes up a lot, and we see the number of black students goes down a lot once you stop factoring in race. This is going to be relevant because now that Harvard can't do that, we're going to see overall admits go down. Coconut, when you say that's not what that means, can you explain what do you mean by that? We're going to talk about those in a second. The personality scores and shit. We're going to talk about that in a second. Yep. But right now, I just want to know what coconut strawberry when you say that's not what that means, because my understanding is that's what it means. That when you look at the total admits by race under different admissions policies, the their calculations indicate that less than a third of black people get in specifically because of race-based affirmative action. If I'm wrong on that, coconut, please let me know, and also tell me why I'm wrong. I'll let you. No. Hold on. So by combining race, like an athlete, that 31% isn't representative of the effect of just race. It's not okay. Let me explain. It's not representative of just race. If you remove racial consideration, legacy consideration, and athletic consideration, that is what this is representative of. And legacy in athletics, as we see from the numbers above, um, helps white people and hurts black people. Without legacy, without athletics, black enrollment goes up. Okay. Now, except for athletics, I suppose specifically, it goes down by 1. So it has no significant effect whatsoever. Without legacy, black enrollment goes up. So we know that we remove the thing that lowers black enrollment, and we remove the thing that has no impact, and we remove the thing that gives them a massive boon, and all of a sudden the number drops from 1367 with all of them down to 428. If we know that legacy is hurting black enrollment, that must mean that when you remove those 3 things, that race is actually has a more than 2/3 impact on black enrollment, because now it's down below 31%, or down to 31%, so below 1/3. That's what that means. So when people say, "Oh, it's no big deal," it's just like when 2 people have similar scores, and you were just trying to find like the one difference. Race is the deciding factor. That's not what that means. That's not what that means at all. What it means is that 2/3 of black student admits to Harvard wouldn't have gotten in without race. When you look at the average SAT scores between racial groups, it's not even close. Right? Asians are significantly above black student enrolls. Um, this is public data now. You can just look this up. This is a significant, this was, I don't know how much Harvard's going to change. This was significant. And affirmative action made up 2/3 of Harvard's black student base. Okay, now that we've talked about that for a little while, you guys know some information about Harvard specifically. Here she is. The Supreme Court of the United States. Students for Fair Admissions Incorporated versus the President and Fellows of Harvard College. This is the case that dropped today. That somewhat, not completely as we're going to find out, destroyed affirmative action. Now, this might be, for those of you, I'll do my best here, but I feel like I would be not doing my duty if I didn't at least read the syllabus. This is a 237-page document. We're not going to read the whole thing, okay? The concurrences have some flowery language. Clarence Thomas brings up very important things, such as stereotype threat, such as the mismatch theory, such as and a number of other things that we've already talked about, we've argued about, especially in the panel. We're not going to read the whole thing on stream because, again, it's 237 pages. We could be here all night, I suppose, if we wanted to, but we are going to read the syllabus. So for those of you who want to hear me read a document, stick around. For those of you who are like, oh my fucking God, that's going to be so boring, just know I will be putting in analysis, okay? And you can always check out the YouTube channel and afterwards if you decide tonight's not the night, but if you stick around, I'd appreciate that. You can, you know, let me know what your thoughts are. I will be, while we're going through, I'll be checking Twitch chat and answering questions. Any questions as to legal terms, thoughts, arguments, we'll go ahead and address it. So this is a syllabus. Now, what is a syllabus? A syllabus is the summary of the majority opinion. And it's important because, oh shit, I have a brief due tomorrow. I need to know what this case is about now. And I'm not going to read 237 pages. So I'm just going to read the syllabus. And then I'm going to be like, oh, this case is relevant. And now if it's relevant, now I have to read the whole thing and find specific citations to use for my briefs. Harvard College and the University of North Carolina are two of the oldest institutions of higher learning. Blah, 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 blah. Every year, tens of thousands of students apply to each school. Many fewer are admitted. Both Harvard and UNC employ a highly selective admissions process to make their decisions. Admissions to each school can depend on a student's grades, recommendation letters, or extracurricular involvement. It can also depend on their race. Not implicitly race, explicitly race. The question presented is whether the admission system used by Harvard College and UNC are lawful under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. At Harvard, each application for admission is initially screened by a first reader. This is the process that we talked about when we're going over the Harvard data, who assigns a numerical score in each of the 6 categories: academic, extracurricular, athletic, school support, personal, whatever that means, and overall, whatever that means. For the overall category, a composite of the 5 other ratings, a first reader can and does consider the applicant's race. Harvard's admissions subcommittees then review all applications from a particular geographic area. These regional subcommittees make recommendations to the full admissions committee, and they take an applicant's race into account. When the 40-member full admissions committee begins its deliberations, it discusses the relative breakdown of applicants by race. The goal of the process, according to Harvard's director of admissions, is ensuring there is no dramatic drop-off in minority admissions from the prior class. That is the goal. The goal of this is to make sure that minority admissions remain somewhat stable. We're not going to read the whole thing, cheap ass. I'm very sorry, Roland. How fast did lefties give? They got to take away legacy admits to be fair. We've already seen that. Every single criticism I've seen of affirmative action on Twitter and Facebook brings up legacy. When we already just went over the data, and legacy is actually a tiny fraction of consideration. Less than 5% of white people get in because of legacy. Asian people don't benefit from legacy. And race is a massive factor. 2/3 of black students would not have gotten in without racial affirmative action. So 2/3, less than 5%. That's what legacy gets you. But perfectly consistent here, I think legacy is pretty dumb too. It's just not nearly as pervasive. When the 40-member full admissions committee begins its deliberations, it discusses the relative breakdown of applicants by race. The goal of the process, according to Harvard's director of admissions, is ensuring there is no dramatic drop-off of minority admissions to their prior class. An applicant receiving a majority of the full committee's votes is tentatively accepted for admission. At the end of this process, the racial composition of the tentative applicant pool is discussed to the committee. Disclosed to the committee. The last stage of Harvard's admissions process, called the LOP, they literally call it the LOP, where they lop off certain students, winnows the list of tentatively admitted students to arrive at the final class. Applicants that Harvard considers cutting at this stage are placed on the LOP list, which contains only 4 pieces of information: legacy status, recruited athletic status, financial aid eligibility, and race. In the Harvard admissions process, race is a determinative tip for a significant percentage of all admitted African American and Hispanic applicants. Everyone admitted it was significant. The actual significance of it is up for was debated. We know that it's significant, 2/3. UNC has a similar admissions process. We're not going to go over their entire process. It's very similar. I don't have the UNC data in the same way I have the Harvard data, so I can't double check what they're saying here, but it's a similar process. Petitioner Students for Fair Admissions is a nonprofit organization whose stated purpose is to defend human and civil rights secured by law, including the right of individuals to equal protection under the law. SFFA filed separate lawsuits against Harvard and UNC, arguing their race-based admissions programs violate, respectively, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Under separate bench trials, both admissions programs were found permissible under the Equal Protection Clause and this court's precedents. In the Harvard case, the First Circuit affirmed, and this court granted certiorari. In the UNC case, the court granted certiorari before judgment held. This is the part we're looking for, okay? Right here. This is all fluff, mostly. Harvard's and UNC's admissions programs violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. You are having your 14th Amendment protections violated when you discriminate against students based on their race at a public university, and you are violating Title IX if you do it at private. Title VI, sorry. 6 and 9 seem similar to me. Title VI. Because SFFA, this was actually a motion to try to say that Students for Fair Admissions couldn't bring a lawsuit because fuck them, they're not like a genuine membership organization. Supreme Court says no, they have standing, their organization, they fulfill all the requirements of the Hunt test. This is, we can go into this, we're not going to. It's whatever. And then they go into and this is the rest of the syllabus here. Princess Courtney, there is no panel debate today. I am very sorry. We're going to go ahead and just do a reading of the syllabus, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the dissents. Proposed by Congress and ratified by the states in the wake of the Civil War, the 14th Amendment provides that no state shall deny to any person the equal protection of the laws. Proponents of the Equal Protection Clause described its foundational principle as not permitting any distinctions of law based on race or color. Any law which operates upon one man, they maintain, should operate equally upon all. Accordingly, as this court's early decisions interpreting the Equal Protection Clause explained, the 14th Amendment guaranteed that the law in the states shall be the same for the black as for the white, that all persons, whether colored or white, shall stand equal before the laws of the states. Pretty clear. They weren't deciding affirmative action back then. It wasn't like the case with Dobbs, where you had the people writing the 14th Amendment were also banning abortion. In this one, you had the people writing the 14th Amendment saying, hey, you can't discriminate against white people either. It's not acceptable. Despite the early recognition of the broad sweep of the Equal Protection Clause, the court, alongside the country, quickly failed to live up to the clause's core commitments. For almost a century after the Civil War, state-mandated segregation was in many ways of the nation a regrettable norm. This court played its own role in that ignoble history, allowing in Plessy v. Ferguson the separate but equal regime that would come to deface much of America. After Plessy, American courts labored with the doctrine of separate but equal for over half a century. Brown versus Board of Education is like the biggest one. You know, separate but equal doesn't apply. Now, Brown was actually only somewhat supposed to apply to schools, not other things, but it very quickly applied to everything. Some cases in this period attempted to curtail the perniciousness of the doctrine by emphasizing that it required states to provide black students educational opportunities equal to, even if formally separate from, those enjoyed by white students. But the inherent folly of that approach of trying to derive equality from inequality soon became apparent, as the court subsequently recognized even racial distinctions that were argued to have no palpable effect worked to subordinate the afflicted students. By 1950, the inevitable truth of the 14th Amendment had thus begun to reemerge. Separate cannot be equal. The culmination of this approach came finally in Brown versus Board. There, the court overturned the separate but equal regime established in Plessy and began on the path of invalidating all de jure racial discrimination by the states and federal government, specifically by the states and federal government. The conclusion reached by the Brown Court was unmistakably clear. The right to a public education must be made available to all on equal terms. The court reiterated that rule just 1 year later, holding that full compliance with Brown required schools to admit students on a racially non-discriminatory basis. Brown required schools to admit students on a racially non-discriminatory basis. Hey, better. Thank you. Title VI. Yeah, sorry. I said Title IX. Title IX is gender protections. That's protections. Schools can't discriminate based on gender if they want to get Title IX funding. Title VI is race. So, sorry about that. In the years that followed, Brown's fundamental principle that racial discrimination in public education is unconstitutional reached other areas of life. This is what I was talking about before, how it quickly spread. For example, state and local laws requiring segregation in busing, Gale versus Browder, that was removed. Racial segregation in the enjoyment of public beaches and bathhouses, Dawson, that was removed. I have never seen a fucking bathhouse. I'm guessing that's just spas. I don't even see many spas, to be honest with you. And anti-miscegenation laws, Loving versus Virginia, allowing black people and white people to marry each other. These decisions and others like them reflect the core purpose of the Equal Protection Clause, doing away with all governmentally imposed discrimination based on race. This is quoted in Palmore versus Sadati, doing away with all governmentally imposed discrimination based on race. It doesn't get any more clear than that. Eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. Accordingly, the court has held the Equal Protection Clause applies without regard to any differences in race, color, or nationality, and it is universal in its application. Yekwo versus Hopkins. For the guarantee of equal protection cannot mean one thing when applied to one individual and something else when applied to a person of another color. This is actually quoting Bakke. So basically the holding rule in Bakke is contradictory to its logic, and there's plenty of quotes here that are, anti-racism, but for some reason, affirmative action, we just had this weird exception where, no, you can't be racist except for this. Any exceptions to the Equal Protection Clause guarantee must survive a daunting two-step examination known as strict scrutiny. Now, there's three standards here. There's rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, and strict scrutiny. This is an entirely invented system that the Supreme Court uses to judge whether or not people can discriminate. If the court decides that a particular topic doesn't involve a protected class, then in order to do an action, the government just needs to show they have a rational basis for doing it. That's all they need to show. If it involves women, specifically, or men, I suppose, any kind of sex discrimination, they need to show intermediately, there's an intermediate scrutiny applied, which means that the court's going to look at it kind of difficult, like look at it with a squinted eye and say, hey, we don't know if you should be able to do this. You got to show that you have more than a rational basis. You got to show us that you have a good reason why you can't have, you got to discriminate based on sex here, such as sports, bathrooms, strip clubs, etc. You got to prove you got a good reason. And then strict scrutiny is for race and a few other things, but this is important for race here. For race, it's you have to show that you can't do this any other way. Otherwise, you can't do it. And you got to show that you have to do this. You got to do something, and you can't do it any other way. If you can show those two things, you got to. So this is the language they use. Okay. You got to use. We got to do this, right? Further compelling governmental interests, and there's no other way you can do it. And second, whether the government's use of race is narrowly tailored. Narrowly tailored. No other way. And you have a very compelling interest to do so. You got to get both of those in order to racially discriminate if you're the government. This has been upheld a number of times, not only by Pina, but by Grutter, Fisher, etc. Acceptance of race-based state action is rare for a reason. Distinctions between citizens solely because of their ancestry are by their very nature odious to a free people whose institutions are founded upon the doctrine of equality. Rice versus Cayetano. I didn't read that one, but I like this quote. This court first considered whether a university may make race-based admissions decisions in Bakke. In a deeply splintered decision that produced 6 different opinions, Justice Powell's opinion for himself alone would eventually serve as the touchstone for constitutional analysis of race-conscious admissions policies that were cited in Grutter, 2003 Grutter. This is the case that essentially established you can be racist in admissions policies. After rejecting 3 of the university's 4 justifications as not compelling, not sufficiently compelling, and under that strict scrutiny, the 2-part test, Justice Powell turned its last interest asserted to be compelling, obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a racially diverse student body. This is the only reason that universities can racially discriminate legally. Well, maybe not now, but historically. Historically, this is the only reason. Obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a racially diverse student body. This is important. In my review of the data here on the effect of affirmative action, you are going to find very little data, despite the fact this has been going on for decades. Bakke was in the 70s, okay? Decades. The data is very fluffy. There's data that suggests that racially integrated classrooms actually perform worse on some metrics. There's data that indicates they perform better on other metrics. There's no explanation as to why this data is so fragile that a lot of that data wasn't actually presented here. It was broad statements that racially integrated schools allow students to, and this you'll read this in the dissent, to learn more richly and deeply about the world. That's what they say. And that's going to be mentioned here in a second, because what does richly and deeply mean, and how do you test for that, especially under strict scrutiny? I don't know, and neither does the majority. Justice Powell found that interest to be a constitutional permissible goal for an institution of higher education, which was entitled as a matter of academic freedom to make its own judgments as to the selection of its student body. But a university's freedom was not unlimited. Racial and ethnic distinctions of any sort are inherently suspect, Justice Powell explained, and antipathy toward them was deeply rooted in our nation's constitutional and demographic history. Justice Powell is saying, man, we're super suspect of this racial shit, and you taking into consideration is deeply, us being against it is deeply rooted in our Constitution and history. Accordingly, a university could not employ a 2-track quota system with a specific number of seats reserved for individuals from a preferred ethnic group. Neither still could a university use race to foreclose an individual from all consideration. Race could only operate as a plus in a particular applicant's file. And even then, it had to be weighed in a manner flexible enough to consider all pertinent elements of diversity in light of the particular qualifications of each applicant. You can consider race, can't be the only thing, can't be super big, although, as we know already, it's been super big, 2/3 of black admits to Harvard. Race could only operate as a plus, and it had to be weighed flexibly. For years following Bakke, lower courts struggled to determine whether Justice Powell's decision was binding precedent, which then Grutter decided. Then in Grutter versus Bollinger, the court for the first time endorsed Justice Powell's view that a student body diversity is a compelling state interest that can justify the use of race in university admissions. The Grutter Majority's analysis tracked Justice Powell's in many respects, including its insistence on limits on how universities may consider race in their admissions programs. Those limits, Grutter explained, were intended to guard against two dangers that all race-based government action portends. The first is the risk that the use of race will devolve into illegitimate stereotyping. I wonder if we've seen that. Illegitimate stereotyping. Maybe the stereotyping that Harvard has engaged in, which is that Asians, for some reason, score lower in personality. Illegitimate stereotyping. If you believe Asians just have less personality, then I suppose you would support Harvard here. Admissions programs could thus not operate on the belief that minority students always or even consistently express some characteristic minority viewpoint on any issue. Race does not come with a viewpoint. There is no such thing as a black viewpoint or a white viewpoint. There are individual viewpoints according to the 14th Amendment, according to the U.S. Supreme Court. The second risk is that race would be used not as a plus, but as a negative to discriminate against those racial groups that were not the beneficiaries of race-based preference. A university's use of race, accordingly, could not occur in a manner that unduly harmed non-minority applicants. To manage these concerns, Grutter imposed one final limit on race-based affirmative action programs, admissions programs. At some point, the court held they must end, recognizing that enshrining a permanent justification for racial preferences would offend the Constitution's unambiguous guarantee of equal protection. The court expresses expectations that in 25 years, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. So, 2003, 20 years ago, 20 years after 2003, 2023, that's this year. 5 on top of that, 28. So even under Grutter, even if Grutter was not overturned, which it was today, even under that, it would be on its last limb. Thank you, Alley Cat. You linked me the oh boy. Yeah. We're going to talk about Harvard's statement on this because they basically demonstrated that they're fucking racist. Actually, racially prejudiced, not, 20 years have passed since Grutter, with no end to race-based college admissions in sight, but the court has permitted race-based college admissions only within the confines of narrow restrictions. Such admissions programs must comply with strict scrutiny, may never use race as a stereotype or negative, and must at some point end. Respondents' admission systems fail each of these criteria and therefore must be invalidated under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Respondents fail to operate their race-based admissions programs in a manner that is sufficiently measurable to permit judicial review under the rubric of strict scrutiny. First, the interests that respondents view as compelling cannot be subjected to meaningful judicial review. These include interests like training future leaders, acquiring new knowledge based on diverse outlooks, promoting a robust marketplace of ideas, and preparing engaged and productive citizens. While these are commendable goals, they are not sufficiently coherent for purposes of strict scrutiny. It is unclear how courts are supposed to measure any of these goals, or if they could, to know when they have been reached so that racial preferences can end. How many future leaders do you have to train before affirmative action is over? There's no way to know. The elusiveness of respondents' asserted goals is further illustrated by comparing them to recognized compelling interests. For example, courts can discern whether the temporary racial segregation of inmates will prevent harm to those in the prison. But the question whether a particular mix of minority students produces engaged and productive citizens or effectively trains future leaders is standardless. Second, respondents' admissions programs fail to articulate meaningful connection between the means they employ and the goals they pursue. To achieve the educational benefits of diversity, Respondents measure the racial composition of their classes using racial categories that are plainly overbroad, expressing, for example, no concern whether South Asian or East Asian students are represented as Asians, arbitrary and undefined, Hispanic, or under-inclusive. There is no category for Middle Eastern students. In fact, in California, they put Armenians under Hispanic, which, as you know, is not correct. The unclear connection between the goals that respondents seek and the means they employ preclude courts from meaningfully scrutinizing respondents' admissions programs. The university's main response to these criticisms is, quote, trust us. They assert that universities are owed deference when using race to benefit some applicants but not others. While this court has recognized a tradition of giving a degree of deference to a university's academic decisions, it has made clear that deference must exist within constitutionally prescribed limits. Respondents have failed to present an exceedingly persuasive justification for separating students on the basis of race that is measurable and concrete enough to permit judicial review, as the Equal Protection Clause requires. All right, there we go. First one's kicked out of the court. Respondents' race-based admission systems also fail to comply with Equal Protection Clause's twin commands that race may never be used as a negative and that it may not operate as stereotype. The First Circuit found that Harvard's consideration of race had resulted in fewer admissions of Asian American students. The data we have proves this. Respondents' assertion that race is never a negative factor in their admissions cannot withstand scrutiny. College admissions are zero-sum. If you let one person in, you're not letting another person in. And a benefit provided to some applicants but not others necessarily advantages the former at the expense of the latter. If you give a bonus to one racial group in a zero-sum competition, you are necessarily disadvantaging other racial groups. Imagine if you had a chess game and we said, don't worry, we're just going to give like the black player 10 points. We're not going to take away any points from you. Well, if I lose, now points in chess, it doesn't, whatever. Let's use a different game then. Football. The team with the black quarterback, they get 10 points. But the team with the white quarterback, we're not taking away your points. You just don't get the 10 points. Well, it's the same thing, right? In a competition, if one team or one person gets points, the other person loses. We saw that with the data. Asian Americans did not get in because of racial affirmative action in Harvard. And when you remove affirmative action, a whole bunch more Asians get in. That's what the data determined. It's not even a suggestion. It's determined. Respondents' admissions programs are infirm for a second reason as well. They require stereotyping, the very thing Grutter forswore. When a university admits students on the basis of race, it engages in the offensive and demeaning assumption that students of a particular race, because of their race, think alike. We want a black point of view. What is a black point of view? Well, it's just the point of view that black people have. No, that's racist. Such stereotyping is contrary to the core purpose of the Equal Protection Clause. There we go, number 2. Their second thing, kicked out of the park. Respondents' admissions programs also lack a logical endpoint. Respondents suggest that the end of race-based admissions programs will occur once meaningful representation and diversity are achieved on college campuses. Such measures of success amount little more than comparing the racial breakdown of the incoming class and comparing it to some other metric, such as the racial makeup of the previous incoming class or the population in general, to see whether some proportional goal has been reached. The problem with this approach is well established. Outright racial balancing is patently unconstitutional. With Fisher, they're citing Fisher, which again, it's interesting they're citing that case because that case doesn't agree with what they're about to say. Respondent's second proffered endpoint, when students receive the educational benefits of diversity, fares no better. As explained, it is unclear how a court is supposed to determine if or when such goals would be adequately met. Third, respondents suggest the 25-year expectation in Grutter means that race-based preferences must be allowed to continue until at least 2028. So if you just listen to Grutter, 2028 at the very most. The court statements in Grutter, however, reflected only the court's expectation that race-based preferences would, by 2028, be unnecessary. in the context of racial diversity on college campuses. Finally, respondents argue the frequent reviews they conduct to determine whether racial preferences are still necessary obviates the need for an endpoint, but Grutter never suggested the periodic review can make unconstitutional conduct constitutional. All right. Because Harvard's and UNC's admissions programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, which they do, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints, those admissions programs cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of the Equal Protection Clause. At the same time, nothing. Hold on. We're going to stop right there because this is a critically important. This is a fucking. This is the worst, and this is why I said affirmative action is kind of ended. Okay, because of this one paragraph alone is complete. This is what kind of leaves it. Okay, everything beforehand is ending affirmative action, but then Roberts, in typical fashion, adds this little paragraph at the end that makes things difficult. At the same time, nothing prohibits universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected the applicant's life, so long as that discussion is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability that the particular applicant can contribute to the university. Many universities for too long wrongly concluded that the touchstone of the individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. This nation's constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. What does that mean? This means the affirmative action stuff sucks, and here's why. Oh, but universities can consider how race affects your life. As long as you can write a paragraph, and let's say an entrance essay, saying, oh, because of my race, I've suffered from systemic inequities, which has been made my life very difficult, and I have overcome these through willpower and strength and blah blah blah, and it's given me a unique perspective. And well, now we're gonna wow, riveting paragraph. We're gonna give you a whole bunch of bonus points now. The dissent here, and we're gonna go over it, makes a good point. The dissent in this opinion, written by Kagan. It was written by Sotomayor, joined by Kagan, and the UNC was joined by Jackson. Jackson did not join the Harvard one because she's actually on the board of admissions for Harvard, so she recused herself. What this means, and what the dissent pointed out, is this is a stupid opinion because people are just going to do this. People are just going to get around it by weighing blackness, how that's affected the applicant's life, by weighing this more. They're going to weigh it more on essays. If you write an essay about how blackness affected your life, universities are going to give you 30 points. You write an essay about how whiteness affected your life, you're going to get 1. That's how this is going to work. Now, you might say, well, lactoid, that is just pessimistic. Clearly, universities are going to read this opinion and honestly apply it. We know they're going to stop considering race. They're going to stop giving free points to minority groups because, hey, that's just not constitutional. That's just not right. We're not going to do it. This is the Harvard statement. And it reads almost snivelingly. Okay? It reads fucking snivelingly. Some words today are hard. Dear members of the Harvard community, today the Supreme Court deliberates its decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College. The court held that Harvard College's admission system does not comply with the principles of the Equal Protection Clause embodied in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The court also ruled that colleges, this is the smartass point, the court also ruled that colleges and universities may consider in admissions decisions a applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. We will certainly comply with the court's decision as to the court allowing admissions decisions on an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. Good catch, Apple. His or her, that is not inclusive. That's actually fucked up. And if I was Harvard, you're clearly not telegraphing a equitable and social justice minded admissions program here. His or her, wow, brutal. So they respond in a smartass way saying, we're going to fucking still be racist. Fuck you. That's what this is. And anyone who denies it is just either had their head in the sand or they're intentionally lying to you. They're gonna keep doing it. So the question that we have to ask ourselves here is this case going to actually have any kind of notable effect? Well, I think it will. I think it will still have some effect. I think the effect's going to be that it takes a little bit of power away from people sitting on those admissions committees who are saying, hey, I'm going to be racist. And the court says we can, and our policy is that we can, so you all come along with me, otherwise you're racist too. Otherwise you're racist in the way I don't want you to be. So you got to be racist in the way I want you to be. You got to be racist against Asians, but if any of you are not going to come along with my plan to be racist against Asians, then I'm going to say that you're racist against black people. That the people on those committees have a little bit more of a difficult time doing that now, because what they're going to do is on those committees, the graders, the people that are maybe the more centrist people, maybe the more liberty-minded people are going to be sitting there, and they're going to say, more merit-focused people, they're going to be sitting there saying, well, actually, sir, the Supreme Court said we can't do that. And I read this, and it doesn't sufficiently show how their race has actually impacted their life in a way that's as equally impressive of how this other white guy wrote a really long paragraph about how race affected his life. So I can't go along with you. Now, what used to be able to happen is in this scenario, the committee could say, well, no, we have points that are given to black people. So those points apply no matter what. That doesn't happen anymore, right? Now they just don't, the point system doesn't apply in the way that it did. So I think it'll have a little bit of an impact, but it's not going to have a lot, because we see that with California. California banned affirmative action, I believe in 1996, by referendum. And the people there were like, we don't want affirmative action. 74% of Americans don't agree with affirmative action based on race. They don't like it. And so they were like, fuck it, we're not going to have it. And the universities there, what they started doing, what Harvard was even doing before this, is they were ranking Asians lower in personality. What somebody mentioned before, ESG scores, right? Personality scores. emotional maturity. They'll literally like have certain categories such as how dynamic a person is relevant if they get into college. Oh, I had an interview with this person. They're just so dynamic and bubbly and personable. And sure, does the data show that that it just so happens that Asians, for some reason, are not very dynamic on college applications? Fucking, that's weird. Weird, right? Why is it that consistently Asians are just not scoring as high in personality or dynamism or like how expressive they are or how the pizzazz that they have? Asians just don't have the same amount as black people do. They do this already, and they're going to continue doing it, and they're going to do it more now. So, because they put in the majority opinion put in that one paragraph, where they said that you can still be racist, the universities are still going to be racist, and you're still going to see Asian Americans underrepresented in terms of qualified Asians. Asians are underrepresented when you only factor in if they're qualified to be in the school or not. The other criticism I have about this case is it only applies to schools. I think it should apply to employment. You can look at right now, the federal government has affirmative action requirements when it comes to contractors that work with them. Pretty fucked, if you ask me. A lot of cities have certain race-based requirements for grants, using public money. Pretty fucked. And this didn't address that. It really only addressed education, which I understand they're trying to keep it narrow. They're trying to have a narrow decision. Hey, we just decided on education. But I would, and this does somewhat open the floodgates now, metaphorically, for other harmed people to file lawsuits based on racism that's happened to them by the government. So, the next lawsuit's going to be, hey, I'm not allowed to apply for this minority grant provided by the city. I'm going to sue. Maybe that could happen. I lost out on employment because of racial affirmative action. Maybe they're going to sue now. We'll see how far it goes. With Brown versus Board of Education, it started with schools and then it very quickly spread to everything else. So I'm curious to see if that's going to happen here. Just like Brown versus Board of Education, today, the Supreme Court decided that the new separate but equal is not actually equal. That the new system of giving certain minorities a leg up is not okay. And that might spread like wildfire too, to other elements of the economy. But I don't know. I don't know if it will or not. What I think we do know is that this is the first court in a very long time to actually step up and challenge bad law, and actually step up and challenge things that are fucked up from just a legal reasoning perspective. And I think it somewhat demonstrates how important it is to be engaged, because we're going to talk about the dissent in a second. And I think the dissent highlights, we're not going to read the whole, we might read the whole dissent, but the dissent highlights the way that left-wing partisan activists think about affirmative action. That your left-wing partisan activists think about affirmative action. You can see when I just went through the syllabus of the majority opinion, it was referencing the Constitution, it was referencing data provided by Harvard, it was referencing all of those things, right? This is specifically what's happening. This is the law, the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. This is the law. This is quotes from other cases that we've decided. Jurisprudence. This is the law, jurisprudence, blah, blah, blah. This is the reason why we're overturning affirmative action. This is the law, what's happening, decision. The dissent quotes multiple CRT textbooks. challenge. I think there was one in there. I'm going to butcher the title a little bit, but we'll bring it up. It was like challenging whiteness in today's society. Uh, 20, some authors in 2013. Um, Quite literally citing social scientists who are arguing that there's the specter of racism above all of us all the time. But more importantly than that, here, let's just go down the dissent. The concurrences just really go into more detail. They all join the same opinion, so it was 6-3 opinion. But the concurrences go into more detail as to, hey, this is why this is important. This is why this specific part is important. This is why it matters. Clarence Thomas's concurrence talks a lot about, uh, you know, it's got some fluffy language in there. I'm not going to lie about how racism is evil, how we need to overcome this, um, in terms of we have to. It's unconstitutional. How we can black people, although black people have suffered, affirmative action is still not legal. You know, there's some fluffy language in it, but it's still an interesting read. But really, it just goes over the same points. All right, Sotomayor's dissent. So I read Sotomayor's dissent. I read the majority, and I read Sotomayor's dissent. I did not read all the concurrences because legally they're not particularly relevant because they just concur with the majority, and a lot of it's repetitive. I did skim it. A lot of it's repetitive. They just go over interesting examples. They go over interesting hypotheticals. It's a good read if you're a nerd like that, but it's not critical to getting an understanding of this. Um, do you know? Do you happen to know what the fuck Biden was talking about when he said the decision goes against decades of precedent? Yeah, he's talking about precedent is jurisprudence. Precedent is a word used to describe. Uh, so we have a common law system in America, in which the law of the land is statutes, but it's also more specifically how the Supreme Court has interpreted those statutes, or how the Supreme Court um, has interpreted amendments to the Constitution. And so, when the Supreme Court decides something, other courts have to follow it. Lower courts have to follow it. That's the rule. The Supreme Court can overturn themselves, but they try to avoid doing so because they can cite themselves as justification for why they're doing something, because law is a intrinsically conservative device, right? It is about maintaining the status quo, more or less. Which the dissent says, oh, these judges are disrupting the status quo, which is interesting coming from them. But that's what they're referring to when they say goes against decades of precedent. So Bakke basically said, yes, you can be racist, just not quotas. Sort of, like it was questioned about whether or not that applied. Ballinger comes in and says, hey, no, you can be racist, just as long as you know quotas. And then the Fisher case was cited, you can be racist, just no quotas. And so there is precedent for affirmative action, undoubtedly. And today's case overrules that precedent. But the Supreme Court has the legal authority to do so. So people saying, oh, the Supreme Court overruled themselves, that just can't happen. Well, actually, the Supreme Court is the only court that can overrule the Supreme Court. And legally, they can do so. So the fact that when they say, well, this just goes against decades of precedent, that's just cope. That's what that is, unironically. Loving this conservative Supreme Court, this Supreme Court is seriously been one of the most principled. Even when they decided, I did not like the McGirt ruling from a personal moral standard, but from a legal standard, Gorsuch was right. I think this Supreme Court has been one of the most principled, honest, legally capable courts that we've ever had. without question. They are the only thing that's like preventing us from just not having, in my opinion, not having a cohesive rule of law in the country. So, yeah, very good. All right. Justice Sotomayor, with whom Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson joined dissenting. Obviously, right here, like I said, Justice Jackson did not participate in the consideration or decision of the case Harvard and joins this opinion only as applies to case North Carolina. Okay? Because it is, thank you, Durka. It is, because she sits on the board of admissions for Harvard, or some committee. So she recused herself, which is fair. If you sit on the admissions board of a college and the lawsuit is about the admissions of that college, you probably should recuse yourself. So credit to her for that. The fact that Justice Jackson recused herself, I mean, even if she didn't, it wouldn't affect the decision at all because it's still 6-3. And then I guess in this, in Harvard 6-2. But good, I give her bonus points for that. Yeah, bonus points. All right. The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment enshrines a guarantee of racial equality. The court long ago concluded this guarantee can be enforced through race-conscious means in a society that is not, and has never been, colorblind. The court recognized the constitutional necessity of racially integrated schools in light of the harm inflicted by segregation and the importance of education to our democratic society. For 45 years, the court extended Brown's transformative legacy to the context of higher education, allowing colleges and universities to consider race in a limited way and for the limited purpose of promoting the important benefits of racial diversity. They admit this here. This whole fucking dissent is contradictory to itself, and here's why. The first paragraph says, we can enforce equality through race-conscious means in a society that is not colorblind, right? Society is unfair. Oh, but the decision allows universities to consider race in a limited way and for the limited purpose of promoting the important benefits of racial diversity. Not racial justice. No, this is Sotomayor. Not racial justice, not undoing the legacy of slavery, not undoing redlining or black student underachievement in elementary and high schools. This has nothing to do with that. According to the precedent that they are claiming is so important to them, that is not the important part. Universities can consider race in a limited way and for the limited purpose of promoting the important benefits of racial diversity. What important benefits? Well, they will describe the richness and deepness that comes with such. This limited use of race has helped equalize educational opportunities. Whoa. This limited use of race has helped equalize educational opportunities for all students of every race. Why is that important? Why bring this up? I'm confused. Why are we trying to equalize educational opportunities? That's not what affirmative action is about. Affirmative action is about racial diversity. That's all it is. We just got to promote the important benefits of racial diversity. The Bakke opinion, the Grutter opinion, which built on Bakke, the Grutter opinion stated, no, this isn't about achieving racial equity. We're allowing colleges to be racist to accomplish a goal that we have found to be super important, which is student diversity. And Grutter does not say that this isn't racism. Grutter says, yes, you can be racist. You can be racist, but only because this goal is so beneficial. Racial diversity, because it's so beneficial, you can be racist. That's what the precedent they're citing here is. So keep that in mind when we're going through this dissent, because everything they write here that has nothing to do with racial diversity and instead talks about racial equality is irrelevant to the precedent they are citing. The precedent of affirmative action has nothing to do with racial equity or equality. It just doesn't. And you can look into the cases if you don't believe me. This is not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about colleges can be racist for diversity's sake. Tainted. Do you think this actually changes anything, such as law schools that grant entry if they're dynamic? We brought this up a little bit earlier, but I'm absolutely going to bring it up again. I think this changes it a little bit, but you are absolutely going to have schools that are going to hide this under the rug. In fact, now's a good time to go back to our Harvard statement. This is the statement that Harvard released after this decision. This is their smart ass fucking comment. Dear members of the Harvard community, today the Supreme Court delivered its decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College. The court held that Harvard College's admission system does not comply with the principles of the Equal Protection Clause embodied in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. This is where the smartassery begins. The court also ruled that colleges and universities may consider in admissions decisions an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. They are absolutely going to do this. They are absolutely going to do this. We know it. We know they're going to do it. They just said they're going to do it. They just said they're still going to be racist. So yeah, they're still going to do it. I'm running up on a bio break soon. So here's what we'll do. I'm just going to leave this up on the screen for a second. And then I'll be right back. So you guys can read this and get angry at Harvard while I'm being right back. Don't mind me with my glasses on. Okay. Something I just thought of. Yeah, I know. I had to go check on something. Something I just thought of is the majority opinion, not the syllabus version, but the actual opinion, does talk about um, the, the problem of how universities are going to try to get around this, and basically, honestly, dodges the issue. The opinion says, well, we're here to decide the law, not what places might do. Um, that's quite literally what they said. So anyway, for 45 years, oh yeah, the court recognized the constitutional necessity of racially integrated schools. By Browns, the limited use of race has helped equalize educational opportunities. Don't know why that's relevant. For all students of every race and background, it has improved racial diversity on college campuses. This is the only thing they can consider right here. It's the only thing. This cannot be a thing. Although progress has been slow and imperfect, race-conscious college admission policies have advanced the Constitution's guarantee of equality and have promoted Brown's vision of a nation with more inclusive schools. When they say race-conscious college admissions, what they're saying is that if you're Asian, you get less points. That's what they're saying. They should just say that. Although progress has been slow and imperfect, giving black people more points and Asian people less points in the college admissions policies has advanced the Constitution's guarantee of equality and have promoted Brown's vision of a nation with more inclusive schools. Because that's what they're doing. It's just weird to me how, like, race conscious college admissions policies. What does that mean? Race conscious college admissions policies. It means you're giving points to some races over the others. That's what you're doing. Just say it. Just fucking say it. Just fucking say it. That's what you're doing. Just say it. Stop this fucking bullshit. Today, the court stands in the way and rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. It holds that race can no longer be used in a limited way in college admissions to achieve such critical benefits. In so holding, the court cements a superficial rule of colorblindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. The court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society, because the court's opinion is not grounded in law or fact and contravenes the vision of the equality embodied in the 14th Amendment. I dissent. Equal educational opportunity is a prerequisite to achieving racial equality in our nation. This is irrelevant. Why are they bringing this up? Why is Sotomayor bringing this up? This was not one of the reasons that you can use affirmative action that was stated in Grutter. This is not one of them. Achieving a diverse student body is the only thing you can look at because of the supposed educational benefits that come from that. Equal educational opportunity is not. Why are we bringing this up? Why is this a thing? If that's not what you're going to be arguing, I think the majority can bring that up because they're talking. Their argument is this is violating the 14th Amendment. From its founding, the United States was a new experiment in a Republican form of government where the democratic participation and capacity to engage in self-rule were vital. Okay. At the same time, American society was structured around the profitable institution that was slavery. Bringing up slavery, which the original Constitution protected. Okay? And the Constitution initially limited the power of Congress to restrict the slave trade. Article 1, subsection 9, clause 1, accorded Southern states additional electoral power by counting 3/5 of their enslaved population in apportioning congressional seats. Okay. Section 2, clause 3, and gave enslavers the right to retrieve enslaved peoples who escaped to free states. I don't know why we're talking about slavery. because a foundational pillar of slavery was the racist notion that black people are a subordinate class with intellectual inferiority. Southern states sought to ensure slavery's longevity by prohibiting the education of black people, whether enslaved or free. C. H. Williams, Self-Taught, African American Education in Slavery and Freedom. This is a 2005 textbook. This is not the law. This is not the law. We're talking about slavery. Thus, from this nation's birth, the freedom to learn was neither colorblind nor equal. With time, and at the tremendous cost of the Civil War, abolition came. More than 2 centuries after the first African enslaved persons were forcibly brought to our shores, Congress adopted the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except for a punishment for crime. Like all great historical transformations, emancipation was a movement, not a single event owed to any single individual, institution, or political party. The second founding, another book. The fight for equal education opportunity. However, was a key driver. Literacy was an instrument of resistance and liberation. Education provided a means to write a path to freedom and to learn of abolitionist activities. It allowed enslaved black people to disturb the power relations between master and slave, which fused their desire for literacy with their desire for freedom. Put simply, the very feeling of inferiority which slavery forced upon black people furthered an intense desire to rise out of their condition by means of education. W.E.B. Du Bois, Black Reconstruction in America, 1960 to 1980, page 638. You guys see a trend here? Where we're already over a page in, and we're not talking about whatsoever the benefits that come from diversity in a college. We're talking about slavery. Why? Why is that relevant? When the argument for affirmative action, the presidential argument, is not about slavery or racial justice or any of these things. It's about the educational benefits that come with a diverse student group. That's all it's supposed to be about. And the reason I keep harping on this is because I think this dissent, we're more than 2 pages in, and nothing but slavery and Reconstruction. Abolition. The Southern states replaced slavery with a system of laws which imposed upon black people onerous disabilities and burdens and curtailed their rights to pursue life, liberty, and property to the extent that the freedom was of little value. These black codes discriminated against black people on the basis of race, regardless of whether they had been previously enslaved. Furthermore, the criminal punishment exception in the 13th Amendment facilitated the creation of a new system of forced labor in the South. Southern states expanded their criminal laws, which in turn permitted involuntary servitude as punishment for convicted black persons. D. Blackman, Slavery by Another Name, the Re-Enslavement of Black Americans from Civil War to World War II. States would require, for example, that black people sign a labor contract to work for a white employer or face prosecution for vagrancy. State laws then force black convicted persons to labor in plantations, mines, and industries of the South. Okay, where are we at? Page 5. Page 5. And we're talking about slavery. What this shows is what we all knew all along. The primary motivation for affirmative action is not the primary motivation for affirmative action, as emphasized by the first 5 pages of their opinion, isn't about the educational benefits of diversity in classrooms, partially because they don't have the research to back up that claim. For them, it's a racial justice issue. They just can't directly say it because the Supreme Court precedent that they're resting on by saying how, like, this is the defense of affirmative action specifically says you cannot base affirmative action on that. You have to only base it on the benefits of diversity in a student body. But the activists on the court, which are these three, and the left generally, that's not why they care about affirmative action. That's not in their brain. That's not. That's the important part to them. Is, well, we need to make up for slavery. That's why the first 5 pages are nothing but slavery. That we have to make up for slavery. This is why we want affirmative action. This is why we want affirmative action. This is why we want reparations, Reconstruction laws. Congress acted on that recommendation, adopted the 14th Amendment. Proponents of the amendment declared that one of its key goals was to protect the black man and his fundamental right as a citizen with the same shield which it throws over the white man. With the same shield that it throws over the white man. Statement by Senator Howard. That is, the amendment sought to secure to a race recently emancipated, a race that through many generations was held in slavery, all the civil rights that the superior race enjoy. I don't like the use of that word, but okay. That clause commands that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Congress chose its words carefully, opting for the expansive language that focused on equal protection and rejecting proposals that would have made the Constitution explicitly colorblind. No state shall deny to any person within any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws, the protection of the laws, equal protection of the laws to any person. And this rejected proposals that would have made the Constitution explicitly colorblind? Yeah, I just disagree with their analysis here. As written, I don't see how that's fundamentally different than the language they're saying here. Proposed language providing that no state shall recognize, they're cutting out a lot. I want to see the actual full thing because they're not honest people. No state shall, Sotomayor is not an honest person. Nothing about a racial group or nothing. No state shall recognize any distinction between citizens on account of race or color. Yes, because they have to make sure they write down that they were the good people that acknowledged that our country had slaves, not mention that South America literally 4 times amount of slave. Yeah. Well, they're dissenting, so really what they're doing, like the dissenting opinion is just, regardless of who's doing it, whether it be whichever wing of the court you want to look at, a dissenting opinion generally is just a cope and a rant. That's all it is. It's not legally binding. It's just, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to write out like 100 pages explaining why I didn't get my way and why you're all bad. That's every dissent, though. That's not unique here to this one. Simultaneously with the passage of the 14th Amendment, Congress enacted a number of race-conscious laws, leaving no doubt the Equal Protection Clause from its consideration. One such law was the Freedmen's Bureau Act, enacted in 1865, then expanded to 1866, which established a federal agency to provide certain benefits to refugees and newly emancipated freedmen. Freedmen. Didn't they just say before that this was about race and not about recently emancipated slaves? So it seems like before they were saying, well, no, it's about black people, not about slaves. And then out here they're saying it's slaves, not black people. Each year surrounding the passage of the 14th Amendment, the Bureau educated approximately 100,000 students, nearly all of them black, and regardless of degree of past disadvantage. Affirmative action, legislative history of the 14th Amendment. The Bureau also provided land and funding to establish some of our nation's historically black colleges and universities. Wasn't this also, though, because a lot of universities had explicitly racist policies saying that, like, no, you're not allowed into our universities? So this is sort of like a long, separate, but equal. Also, E-SNAP or affirmative action, the legislative history of the 14th Amendment. This was in 1985. Yeah, this was in 1985. And um, yeah, 1867, when universities were segregated, the Bureau provided Howard University tens of thousands of dollars to buy property and construct its campus in our nation's capital because they were believing in separate but equal back then. So they had to they had to be separate but equal, or what they thought was separate but equal. Howard University was designed to provide special opportunities for higher education to the newly enfranchised of the South, but it was available to all black people, whatever may have been their previous condition. Yeah, this is. I don't see how this proves that the 14th Amendment, unless they want to remove, if they want to go back to separate but equal, then that just like the standard at the time, all this supports, right? But they're not proposing that. They're proposing not separate but equal. So if you have integrated colleges, none of this has to do with uh, giving racial groups benefits if they go to specific colleges, especially not around the time of the 14th Amendment. Indeed, contemporaries understood the Freedmen's Bureau Act benefited black people. Supporters defended the law by stressing its race-conscious approach. Um, Statement by Representative Moulton. The true object of the bill is the amelioration of the condition of colored people. That statement is pretty clear. So Representative Moulton believed that the true object of this bill was the amelioration of the condition of colored people. That was, I mean, that specifically would seem to that he saw the 14th Amendment as the object being helping black people. That doesn't necessarily, now I'll agree that obviously the intent there is to help black people then. That doesn't mean that he also intended to have not equal protection apply, right? You can have equal protection applied that protects black people as well. Joint Com Rep 11 reporting that the Union men of the South declared with one voice the Bureau's efforts protected colored people. Opponents argued that the act created harmful racial classifications that favored black people and disfavored white Americans. Distinction account on color between the two races. Legislation for a particular class of blacks to the exclusion of all whites. You raise a spirit of antagonism between the black race and the white race in our country, and the law abiding will be powerless to control it. President Andrew Johnson vetoed the bill on the basis that it provided. This is about a bill? I thought it was about the 14th Amendment. President Andrew Johnson vetoed the bill on the basis that it provided benefits to a particular class of citizens. But Congress overrode his veto, thus rejecting those opponents' objections. The same Reconstruction Congress that passed the 14th Amendment eschewed the concept of colorblindness as sufficient to remedy inequality in education. I like what she's doing here. What she's doing here, although it doesn't show, this does not show that the specific representatives here intended for black people to white people to have less protections than black people. Everything would indicate they wanted them to have the same protections, and having the same protections for black people would help them, and was thus primarily into helping them. That's how I would read it. But she's actually going back and looking at the legislative history of the 14th Amendment and the bills surrounding it. That's good, right? That's what they did in Dobbs, and that's the way to do this. This is like an attempt at originalism. This is an attempt at originalism. So you got to give Sotomayor a little bit of credit here. This is like the first 5 pages are complete ass. It's nothing but slavery, feeling bad and bullshit. But now we're actually getting into some interesting originalist territory where she's making an originalist argument. Now the question is she right? Right? The right thought process, but is it true that that the people who wrote the 14th Amendment actually intended black people to have more protection and more benefits than white people? I think that is not true. And I don't think that anything that she wrote here specifically says that. Congress also debated and passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 contemporarily with the 14th Amendment. The goal of the act was to eradicate the black codes enacted by southern states following ratification of the 13th Amendment. Good. Because the black codes focus on race, not just slavery-related status, the Civil Rights Act explicitly recognized that white citizens enjoyed certain rights that non-white citizens did not. Section 1 of the Act provided that all persons of every race and color shall have the same rights as those enjoyed by white citizens. Section 1 of the Act provided that all persons of every race and color shall have the same rights as those enjoyed by white citizens. Same rights. Similarly, Section 2 established criminal penalties for subjecting racial minorities to different punishment by reason of color or race than is prescribed for the punishment of white persons. In other words, the Act is not colorblind. By using white citizens as a benchmark, the law classified by race and took account of the privileges enjoyed only by white people. So okay, hold on a second. What she's arguing for here, think about this. She's saying, hey, look, here's an example of why it's not colorblind. They're saying black people are going to have the same rights as white people. So because white people are the benchmark, clearly it was only meant to apply one way. Clearly it was only meant for black people to become equal to white people, not white people being treated equally to black people. So under this theory, especially when you bring up different punishment, criminal penalties, different punishment, it would seem that Sotomayor would have to come to the conclusion that if white people got extra years tacked onto their sentence for being white, that this would be consistent with the 14th Amendment. Because in other words, the act is not colorblind. We only said that black people to be equal to white people, not white people to black people. So if we give white people 10 more years, but that ignores the words here. Equal, different punishment by reason of color or race that is prescribed for the punishment of white people. If you give white people more punishment, then it's different. If you give black people, or you give black people more points that you don't give white people, that's different. In other words, the act was not colorblind. I don't understand how that establishes that. By using white citizens as a benchmark, the law classified by race and took account of the privileges enjoyed only by white people. As he did with the Freedmen's Bureau Act, President Johnson vetoed the Civil Rights Act, in part because he viewed it as providing black citizens with special treatment. President Johnson also supported the Klan. I want to make that clear as well. See Messages and Papers 408, 413. The act is designed to afford discriminating protection to colored persons, and its distinction of race and color operates in favor of colored and against the white race. That's what he's saying. It's not what the people who wrote it. This is what Johnson is saying. Again, Congress overrode his veto. It's a very progressive Congress. I guess this was following the Civil War. In fact, Congress reenacted race-conscious language in the Civil Rights Act of 1870, 2 years after ratification of the 14th Amendment. Why didn't they say it? Why didn't they put that there? Congress similarly appropriated federal dollars explicitly and solely for the benefit of racial minorities. For example, it appropriated money for the relief of destitute colored women and children without regard to prior enslavement. Act of July 28, 1866. Several times during and after the passage of the 14th Amendment, Congress also made special appropriations and adopted special protections for the bounty and prize money owed to colored soldiers and sailors of the Union Army. Did they get their money prior or no? In doing so, it rebuffed objections to these measures as class legislation applicable to colored people and not to white people. History makes it inconceivable that race-conscious college admissions are unconstitutional. The Reconstruction era marked a transformational point in the history of American democracy. Its vision of equal opportunity leading to an equal society was short-lived, however, with the assistance of the court. In a series of decisions, the court sharply curtailed the substantial protections and Reconstruction amendments in the Civil Rights Act. That endeavor accumulated with the court's shameful decision in Plessy, which established the equality of treatment exists when the races are provided substantially equal facilities, even though these facilities be separate. These people are calling it this decision shameful. I think that's important to note, that treating people differently, even though you're saying, well, ultimately they're equal, but we're going to treat them differently, calling that opinion shameful. Therefore, with this court's approval, government Governmental enforced segregation and its concomitant destruction of equal opportunity became the constitutional norm and infected every sector of our society, from bathrooms to military units and crucially schools. Powerful dissent, Justice Harlan explained in Plessy that Louisiana law at issue with authorized segregation perpetuated a caste system. Although the state argued that the law prescribed a rule applicable alike to white and colored citizens, all knew the law's purpose was not to exclude white persons from railroad cars occupied by blacks, but to exclude colored people from coaches occupied by assigned to whites. This is an important statement because later the dissent's going to say, well, the majority said this only benefits black people, but Harvard never actually said that. They're going to argue that Harvard said they just take race into consideration, and being white and Asian could be beneficial, even though all knew the purpose was not to give white people and Asian people more points. It was to instead give black people and Native American people more points when applying to Harvard. I think that's what this sentence says, if I'm not mistaken, but could be wrong. That is, the law proceeded on the ground that colored citizens are so inferior and degraded that they cannot be allowed to sit in public coaches occupied by white citizens. Although the white race deems itself to be the dominant race in prestige and achievements in education and wealth and in power, there is no superior dominant ruling class of citizens in the eyes of the law. In that context, Justice Harlan thus announced in his view that our Constitution is colorblind, which they disagreed with. What? Hold on. In that context, Justice Harlan thus announced his view that our Constitution is colorblind. Didn't they just say that the Constitution is not colorblind? And they're calling it in a powerful dissent. This guy disagrees with us. It was not until half a century later in Brown, the court honored the guarantee of equality and the equal protection clause, and Justice Harlan's vision of a constitution that neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens, considering the effects of, end quote, considering the effects of segregation and the role in education in light of its full development and present place in American life throughout the nation, Brown overruled Plessy. They're saying Brown was a race-conscious decision that emphasized the importance of education in our society. Central to the court's holding was a recognition that segregation perpetuates a caste system, wherein black children receive inferior education opportunities solely because of their race, denoting inferiority as to their status in the community. Moreover, because education is the very foundation of good citizenship, segregation in public education harms our democratic society more broadly as well. In light of the harmful effects of entrenched racial subordination and racial minorities in American democracy, Brown recognized the constitutional necessity of a racially integrated system of schools where education is available to all on equal terms. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. I will give her credit that this is good so far in terms of how she's approaching it. They are actually somewhat trying to engage in originalism here, where they're looking back at especially back at the 14th Amendment people. That was pretty good in terms of the process. There was some leaps made, and those leaps are why the majority opinion decided what the majority of justices decided what they decided, and the concurring opinions go over that history as well. But this is proving to be an incredibly good opinion. The overall opinion. This is an incredibly good case in terms of the majority opinion is focusing on the history. The concurring opinions are focusing on the history. And the dissent, once you skip the first 6 pages, is actually trying to focus on the legislative history of the 14th Amendment to overturn Bakke and Grutter, not to necessarily challenge the majority, because keep in mind, it's already been precedent that the 14th Amendment does protect against racial discrimination against white people, right? The precedent of affirmative actions already held that. So right now, Sotomayor is arguing against that. Sotomayor is arguing against the Supreme Court precedent on affirmative action, but she is pointing to historical examples to make that argument. Very good. Um, it's contradictory to the first 6 pages, and it's also contradictory to their supposed support of affirmative action precedent, because they don't support it. Everything we've read, all the good shit we've read so far, has been actually opposed to every Supreme Court case so far on affirmative action. Every single one. She's instead arguing that the school should be able to discriminate based on race in order to help uplift Black people out of poverty and out of discrimination. That's what she's arguing here. So holding this court's post-Brown decisions rejected arguments advanced by opponents of integration, suggesting that restoring race was a criterion of the operation of the public schools. I don't disagree with this. Relying on Justice Harlan's dissent in Plessy, they argued the use of race is improper because the Constitution is colorblind, which Sotomayor also has cited. They also incorrectly claimed that their views align with those of the Brown litigators, arguing that the Brown plaintiffs understood that Brown's mandate was colorblindness. This court rejected that characterization of the thrust of Brown. It made clear that indifference to race is not an end of itself under that watershed decision. The ultimate goal is racial equality and opportunity. Apparently that's from a Green. A brief in Green. Not the actual ruling, but a brief in Green. No. They actually cited the opinion here, okay? This court rejected that characterization as the thrust of Brown. Green. I'll have to read Green. Those rejected arguments mirror the court's opinion today. The court claims that Brown requires that students be admitted on a racially non-discriminatory basis. It distorts the dissent in Plessy to advance a colorblindness theory. Gorsuch here says, today's decision wakes the echoes of Justice John Marshall Harlan in Plessy, stating that the Constitution is colorblind. And Thomas J. The court also invokes the Brown litigators, relying what the Brown plaintiffs had argued. Clarence Thomas. If there was a member of this court who understood the Brown litigation, it was Justice Thurgood Marshall. Why? Because he joined the Bakke plurality. Justice Marshall, he's an interesting justice, by the way. He actually had a couple opinions that are really interesting, specifically in freedom of speech. Pruneyard, the Pruneyard case he wrote, where he actually defended First Amendment protections in publicly available private places in California. Kind of a weird case, but it actually is super interesting. His opinion was not actually the Bakke opinion that came out of it. In fact, Justice Marshall's view was that Bakke's holding should have been even more protective of race-conscious college admissions programs in light of their remedial purpose. Here we go. In fact, Justice Marshall's view, which she is endorsing, was that Bakke's holding should have been even more protective of race-conscious college admissions programs in light of the remedial purpose of the 14th Amendment and the legacy of racial inequality in our society. This paragraph shows it. Arguing that a class-based remedy should be constitutionally permissible in light of the hundreds of years of class-based discrimination against Black Americans. Sotomayor, in her dissent, this is actually more interesting than I thought. Sotomayor, in her dissent, is arguing that Bakke, Grutter, and Fisher should be overturned, just like it was today, should be overturned, but the other way. all the cases thus far are saying, hey, you can't be racist unless it's for student diversity. You can't be racist for any kind of sense of justice or remediation, only for the benefit of student diversity. And then on one side, you have the majority opinion here who's saying 14th Amendment doesn't allow that, right? It's supposed to be about equal protection between black people and white people. And yeah, you can point to the fact that a lot of the legislators were saying this is to protect black people because equal protection at that time was protecting black people, treating them equally to white people because of the racism against black people that existed at that time. But Sotomayor is saying no, we should overturn those affirmative action cases in order to allow even more discrimination in terms of we shouldn't be limited based on the benefits of student diversity. We should be able to discriminate in order to remediate reparations, in order to remediate the remedial purpose of the 14th Amendment, to remediate the harms of racism and slavery. This is why they were talking for 6 pages about slavery. This is why they're being very explicit about it actually now. So before, when I said they weren't actually coming out and saying it, that was wrong of me. They are directly saying this. They are directly saying, actually, you know what? Yeah, we want educational reparations. That's what they want. That's what Sotomayor is arguing for in her dissent. She's arguing for the overturning of, ironically, decades of precedent. 2 decades after Brown and Bakke, a plurality of the court held that attainment of a diverse student body is a compelling and constitutionally permissible goal for the institution of higher education. Race could be considered in the college admissions process in pursuit of this goal. The plurality explained, if it is one factor of many in an applicant's life, and each applicant receives individual review as part of a holistic admissions process. Since Bakke, the court has reaffirmed numerous times. Grutter versus Bollinger, 2003. Gratz versus Bollinger, 2003. Fisher versus University of Texas at Austin, UT. Rejecting petitioners' arguments that race can only be used in consideration of college admissions to remedy identified discrimination. The diversity is too open-ended, ill-defined, and indefinite to constitute a compelling interest. Today's opinion overturns Gratz and Bollinger. Grutter and Gratz. Oh, absolutely. These are overturned by today's decision. And the dissent wants to overturn them too. Now, here we go. This is the important part. Now we're going to talk about the benefits they're talking about. So, one of the important parts. This is their argument for why racial diversity is beneficial. Bakke, Grutter, and Fisher are an extension of Brown's legacy. Those decisions recognize that experience lends support to the view that the contribution of diversity is substantial. Racially integrated schools improve cross-racial understanding, break down racial stereotypes, and ensure that students obtain the skills needed in today's increasingly global marketplace to exposure to widely diverse people, cultures, ideas, and viewpoints. This is not empirically supported by anything here. More broadly, inclusive institutions that are visibly open to talented and qualified individuals of every race and ethnicity instill public confidence in the legitimacy. More broadly, inclusive institutions that are visibly open to talented and qualified individuals, we put black people on our brochures, of every race and ethnicity instill public confidence in the legitimacy and integrity of those institutions and the diverse set of graduates they cultivate. Black people on brochures. That is particularly true in the context of higher education, where colleges and universities play a critical role in maintaining the fabric of society and serve as the training ground for a large number of our nation's leaders. It is thus an objective of the highest order, a compelling interest indeed, that our universities pursue the benefits of racial diversity and ensure the diffusion of knowledge and opportunity available to students of all races. The majority didn't fully disagree with this when they said that, hey, if you can actually show that your race informs some kind of knowledge you have, some kind of character trait you have, you can use that character trait as an argument to get into the college. That's what Harvard pointed to when their smart-ass response. But Sotomayor is saying, well, no, just simply being black gives you that knowledge, and also we should be giving you benefits anyway. In order for the remedial, the reparations, the educational reparations that was intended with the 14th Amendment. This compelling interest in student body diversity is grounded not only in the court's equal protection jurisprudence, but also in principles of academic freedom, which have long been viewed as a special concern for the First Amendment. Consistent with the First Amendment, student body diversity allows universities to promote the robust exchange of ideas, which discovers truth out of a multitude of tongues rather than any kind of authoritative selection. Robust exchange of ideas, which discovers truth of a multiple of tongues rather than through any kind of authoritative selection. Does every white person have the same tongue? The same voice? Indeed, as the court recently reaffirmed in another school case, learning how to tolerate diverse, expressive activities has always been part of learning how to live in a pluralistic society. In short, for more than 4 decades, it has been the court-settled law that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment authorizes limited use of race in college admissions in service for the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. From Brown to Fisher, this court cases have sought to equalize educational opportunity in a society structured by racial segregation and to advance the 14th Amendment's vision of an America where racially integrated schools guarantee students of all races the equal protection of the laws. The first part is arguing to reaffirm the precedent that has supported affirmative action. And the second part of this paragraph is her saying we need to overturn the restrictions put in by the prior cases and allow affirmative action for things other than just getting a diverse student body. Instead, we need to do it to alleviate slavery specifically. And this is more here, talking about long history of racial exclusion, ignoring race will not equalize society. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality. This is talking about how government enforcement of racial segregation, and I've been talking a lot, so I'm slowing down a little bit, but he's talking a lot about how black people are subjected to racism and don't have the same shot in life. Systemic inequities disadvantaging underrepresented racial minorities exist beyond school resources. This is really quick false, by the way. Noting school funding disparities that result from local property taxation. We've brought this up on stream before. In America, per capita, black students in elementary and high school get more money when you account for federal sources, get more money than white students. So if you just look at local property taxation, white students get more. When you look at overall dollars that go into the education, like funding for students, per capita, black students in America get more funding than white students. So this is just false. Wait, hold on. The first part's true, higher concentration of poverty. But this is just false right here. That leaves racial minority students attending schools with fewer resources. Black students actually get more resources per capita. So this is just picking a very specific kind of funding for some reason, which isn't, I don't think that's particularly honest. Underrepresented minorities are more likely to attend schools with less qualified teachers. I don't know about that. They get more money. Less challenging curricula, lower standardized test scores, and fewer extracurricular activities and advanced placement courses. Some of that can be true. It is thus unsurprising that there are achievement gaps along racial lines even after controlling for income differences. It is thus unsurprising there are achievement gaps along racial lines even after controlling for income differences. Oh boy. We're not going to comment on that. I don't know how this follows. How does this follow from this? because they're talking about income, but then they're saying not controlling for income. I don't know. Systemic inequities disadvantaging underrepresented racial minorities exist beyond school resources. Students of color, so particularly black students, are disproportionately disciplined or suspended. That is true. Now there's a question as to is the suspensions just or non-just? They don't go into that. A national survey showed that black students are more than 3 times as likely to be suspended or expelled as their white peers. This does not show racism. Just like differing crime rates between racial groups also does not necessarily show racism. Yes, you're going to have a higher prison population if you're going to have a higher overall crime commission rate, according to FBI statistics. Underrepresented minorities are less likely to have parents with a post-secondary education. That's true. Who may be familiar with the college application process. Black people have less opportunity. Society is fundamentally unequal. UNC was a bastion of white supremacy, slave owners, leaders of the Klan. Student body is primarily white still. It's a problem, apparently. Numbers do not reflect the diversity of the state. Harvard, like other Ivy League universities in our country, stood beside the church and state as the third pillar of a civilization built on bondage. This is by C. Wilder, Ebony and Ivy, Race, Slavery, and the Troubled History of America's Universities, 2013. So I guess because she's arguing for like the overturning of part of the precedent of the affirmative action cases, I guess all of this is somewhat relevant because she's saying, hey, the rules, you know, they should be able to discriminate based on like the history of America, and here's the history of America. So I take back what I said about it not being relevant. They are, just keep in mind, they are arguing for a removal of precedent, and they are arguing for more affirmative action on multiple bases. The first time I read it, when you don't read it out loud, it doesn't. For me, when I was reading it, I'm like, oh my god, like it's just nothing but they're just talking about like the history of racism. They're not talking about like that Bakke and Grutter isn't about that. It's about diverse student body, but you know, they're not quite making the connection there yet, maybe, but they are openly saying they want to bring back different kinds of affirmative action. Which what better place to do that than a dissent? Narrow tailoring does not mean perfect tailoring. That's somewhat true. That is true. This is just they're applying it weird. The court's precedents make clear that narrow tailoring does not require exhaustion of every conceivable race-neutral alternative. That's normally not true in effect. Nor does it require a university to choose between maintaining a reputation for excellence or fulfilling a commitment to provide educational opportunities to members of all racial groups. Right here, this at page 29, they're basically saying the Students for Fair Admissions plans suck because they nearly erase the Native American incoming class. They reduce the population of the racial minority classes, obviously, we talked about the data from Harvard, right? It would reduce it by 2/3 for Black students. So absolutely, it would reduce the number of certain minority groups. Asians would skyrocket, but other minority groups would fall significantly. I'm going to look at your Erica Marsh. So this is a tweet from Erica Marsh. Today's Supreme Court decision is a direct attack on Black people. No Black person will be able to succeed in a merit-based system, which is exactly why affirmative. This is a troll. No Black person will be able to succeed in a merit-based system, which is exactly why affirmative action-based programs were needed. Today's decision is a travesty. This is a troll. This is I'm not falling for this. This person, Erica Marsh, is a troll. Allow me to clarify this tweet, which is being manipulated for propaganda and misinformation by Ultra MAGA. The intention of my tweet is to highlight the prior. Maybe it's not a troll. Oh no. Is it a troll or is it not a troll? Like the use of caps in some of the words makes me think it's a troll, but see, it's always hard to tell because um, because it's not that different from what I would expect the leftist might actually say. Who knows? If it's a troll, good job. If it's not a troll, I think that actually demonstrates how left wingers think about the issue, regardless. So, all right. She's going over the Harvard system. In Grutter, for example, eliminating the use of race would have reduced the underrepresented minority population by 72%. Almost 3/4. In Fisher 2, the use of race helped increase Hispanic representation from 11% to 17%, and African American representation from 3.5% to 6.8, and 94% increase. The dissent, Sotomayor and the dissent here is agreeing with their Harvard data. Well, maybe not agreeing with all of it, because I don't think this is 2/3. That's what? I mean, that'd be a 66%. Well, maybe it's even more then. I'm not sure. I'll have to go, because wouldn't that be a 200% increase? Then? Regardless, the Harvard data says 2/3 of black student admits would have not gotten in. According to the dissent, Sotomayor, who's defending this program, she's saying, at least in Fisher 2, which was a little while ago, I'm pretty sure 2015, 94%, 54% increase for Hispanics. Uh, Limiting the use of race would have reduced the underrepresented minority population by 72%. That's Grutter. That was 2003. So 3/4 roughly in 2003. Oh my God. We're talking massive numbers here. We are talking massive numbers. Wait, the first core concluded what the data actually shows is that admissions have increased for all racial minorities, including Asian American students, whose admission numbers have increased roughly fivefold since 1980 and roughly twofold since 1990. The data also shows that the racial shares of admitted applicants fluctuates more than the corresponding racial shares of total applicants, which is the opposite of one would expect if Harvard imposed a quota. None of this says anything about, like, this right here is irrelevant. This actually is irrelevant to the fact that Asians are discriminated against in admissions. There's no better evidence that the court is overruling the court's precedents than these precedents themselves. Sotomayor also wants to overturn these precedents. Oh no. All right. Yeah, we're going to go over this in 1 second. Okay, I clicked the link, JMOS. I'm going to. All right. Here we go. This is a. This cannot be right. Okay, JMOS, I have that link. We're going to bring that up in a second. If this is true, oh my, this cannot be right. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, though, is when the proponents of those arguments, a greater now in number, in the court return to fight old battles anew, it portrays an unrestrained disregard for precedent. It fosters the people's suspicions that bedrock principles are founded in the proclivities of individuals in this court, not in the law, and it degrades the integrity of our constitutional system of government. The whole okay, this is where she loses me completely. I was giving her credit before when she was talking about how she was going on about, like, yes, 6 pages about slavery, a bunch of pages about educational inequities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that was under the assumption that she was arguing to overturn precedent as well, just in the other way. But now She's saying, actually, no, I'm against overturning precedent as right here. I'm going to criticize you for doing that here. This is crazy. The court's precedents were correctly decided. The opinion today is not workable and creates serious equal protection problems. Okay, now, yeah. When I first said that the dissent was self-contradictory, and then I actually went back a little bit, and I was like, well, hold on a minute. Um, she's actually trying to do some 14th Amendment analysis here to argue for overturning the precedent. Um, Never mind. It is self-contradictory because she argued for most of this for overturning precedent, and now she is saying that we shouldn't do that because they were correctly decided, is what she said. Correctly decided. The correctly decided decisions of the court presidents in Bakke, Grutter, and Fisher were that affirmative action cannot be used with the intention of remedying past discrimination. It's only about getting a diverse student body, which I think makes up a much, much smaller portion of her fucking dissent here because there's really not a lot of evidence. I mean, you guys heard it, right? Richness. It promotes people becoming more cosmopolitan, et cetera, whatever that means. Okay. So J Moss posted a tweet. He says he didn't fact check, but what we're going to do right now is I'm going to do a little bit of fact checking. Let's see if we can actually find that statement. Justice Thomas claims the weight of this evidence is overcome. The court's precedents authorizing a limited use of race in college admissions are not just workable, they have been working. Lower courts have consistently applied them without issue. Today, the court replaces this settled framework. She is advocating for overturning these cases in different ways. This is very frustrating. This is very ridiculous. She's saying, no, these were properly decided, except when they decided the thing against the first 6 pages of my dissent. That's what the discussion needs to be about, right? Ignore this fucking precedent shit. Bakke was just ass, right? It was just ass. Have the debate about whether or not the people who wrote the 14th Amendment actually believed that white people should be subordinate and get less points just for being white. That's the debate has to be about that. Oh my God. This dissent is one of the longest. They both agree that Grutter's reference to 25 years is an arbitrary number. Good. Here we go. Page 57 of her dissent. Justice Thomas claims. I'm going to open up the tweet as well, and I'm going to read it side by side. Justice Thomas claims that the weight of the evidence is overcome by a single, more recent article published in 2016. That article, however, explains the studies supporting the mismatch hypothesis yield misleading conclusions, overstate the amount of mismatch, preclude one from drawing any concrete conclusions, and rely on methodologically flawed assumptions that lead to upwardly biased estimate of mismatch. Economists should be very skeptical of the mismatch hypothesis. Oh, it's gonna make me buy it. J-Moss, give me that article. This is the article that's being referenced. I feel like I... Download full text article purchase. How much are you gonna charge me? Oh boy. God, I'm finding citations to it. Are you serious? It's linked in the tweet? Oh my fucking god. It's linked in the fucking tweet. God damn it. God damn it. This is the paper. Oh my god, it's true. It's true. Page 7. Page 7. Okay, this is Sotomayor's opinion right here. Justice Thomas claims that the weight of the evidence is overcome by a single more recent article published in 2016. This is about the mismatch theory. The mismatch theory is that black students don't do as well because they are put into an environment that isn't like that they haven't had the prerequisites necessary to compete, which is why they have a higher failure rate and why failure rates actually go down once you remove affirmative action. So this is in regards to that. Justice Thomas claims the weight of this evidence is overcome by a single more recent article published in 2016. The article, however, explains that studies supporting the mismatch hypothesis, quote, yield misleading conclusions, quote, overstate the amount of mismatch, preclude one from drawing any concrete conclusions, and rely on methodologically flawed assumptions that lead to upwardly biased estimate of mismatch. Then they link the article at 6. Economists should be very skeptical of the mismatch hypothesis. And then we go to page, it's actually page 5. Hold on. At first blush, economists should be very skeptical of the mismatch hypothesis. After all, affirmative action just expands the choice set. If an individual believes a particular school would be too difficult, then the individual could simply attend another school. By revealed preference, the individual must be better off. Yet, even in the context of rational expectations where student beliefs are right on average given their information sets, there are cases where underrepresented groups could be made better off in the absence of affirmative action. This comes about because schools may have private information about match quality but are letting in lower match quality students in order to satisfy diversity goals. Thus, the information sets of both schools and students are the critical components in driving mismatch. And she summarizes that by saying economists should be very skeptical of the mismatch hypothesis. Lactoid TV now breaks down what just happened. Brief summary. She lied. Just that. How is this anything but a lie? She literally linked. She literally pulled at first blush. She pulled that out. She pulled out the first 3 words, and then pulled out the yet. Even in the context of rational expectations, this happens. This is insane. Wow. Okay. So that happened. Citing no evidence, Justice Thomas also suggests that race-conscious admissions programs discriminate against Asian American students. It's true that SFFA alleged that Harvard discriminates against Asian American students, specifically discriminates them vis-a-vis applicants vis-a-vis white applicants through the use of a personal rating, an alleged highly subjective component of the admissions process that is susceptible to stereotyping and bias. It is also true, however, there was a lengthy trial to test those allegations, which SFFA lost. Justice Thomas points to no legal or factual error. Okay, so they're basically saying they can't prove that Asians are getting the short end of the stick or that they're being directly discriminated against. Only that if you removed affirmative action, the numbers would go up by a third, not that they're being discriminated against or whatever. But so I don't know what to trust at this point of all, and this is kind of why. Okay, so you noticed me doing it a little bit before when she was talking about like things that the 14th Amendment people, the people who wrote the 14th Amendment, what like other things they were deciding. why I was like paying attention to the way Sotomayor was wording things in terms of like, oh, this was meant to protect black people. Therefore, obviously, this means that the Constitution or the 14th Amendment was intended to not be colorblind. That's the wrong conclusion to pull from that. And you have to focus on the wording because the wording here is not being honestly portrayed, right? As we see here, Justice Thomas claims that the weight of this evidence is overcome, blah, 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 blah. Economists should be very skeptical of the mismatch hypothesis when this is what she pulls from, which says the literally exact opposite of what she's citing it to say. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you have to be careful on how she words these things, and you have to read them very carefully. And specific. And this is a good trend, like good thing to do generally when you read anything, whether it be legal decisions or studies. Look at what they're omitting. Right. If they're omitting something, the first question in your mind should be, why are they omitting that? What is the purpose of them omitting that information or selectively pulling certain things out? What are they trying to do? Because everyone is like trying to accomplish something. And if this person is trying to like accomplish something, what are they trying to accomplish and how? What are they advocating for? What are they doing? She's saying that she wants to get racial equity. What is the purpose of her citing different studies to get racial equity? Well, be very careful of everything she's citing then to make sure that it actually is what she says it is, because clearly we just pointed to one example where it's not. So this is Jackson's dissent. She didn't sit on the Harvard case, so I'm a little bit less interested in her opinion, honestly, just for that purpose alone. Um, yeah. So that's the dissent. So we're going to summarize the dissent for you guys. So if you're going to walk away, here's what Sotomayor did. Sotomayor, in this case, was trying to defend affirmative action. And the underlying reason she was trying to defend affirmative action was because it leads to racial inequities. That's her concern. Okay. And so she does two things. She argues primarily for the racial justice historical perspective of trying to defend affirmative action, while in contradiction to that, arguing that the Supreme Court needs to respect precedents here and that the prior cases were resolved correctly. The prior cases said specifically the thing to not do the thing that she's also advocating for doing. So there's a contradiction there. That's the first contradiction. The little bit of credit I gave her was that she is appearing, at least, to try to do some kind of originalist thought process, which that's credit in of itself in terms of looking at the history of the people who wrote the 14th Amendment and what else were they doing and what were they saying at the time of writing the 14th Amendment. That's critically important. So she's actually going in. Is she taking very specific snippets of what people say and omitting other things and using that to sort of inference that the people who wrote the 14th Amendment might not have meant it to apply to protect white people just as much as black people? That's probably that's what she's doing. Um, but even her recounting of the statements of the people who wrote the 14th Amendment, what they're saying, even her, right? When you look at it, nothing she wrote states that the people who wrote the 14th Amendment did not intend for the 14th Amendment to have the public laws apply equally to white people as they would black people. Okay? Nothing she said defeats that point. And I don't even know if I trust what she said, to be honest with you, because clearly I can't trust at least one thing she said. She sits on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. Okay, so J Moss posted a Twitter thing here. A Jackson uh, descent apparently for high risk black newborns. Here, I'll just type that in. Let's see if I find it. Yeah, she actually wrote it. For high risk black newborns, having a black physician more than doubles the likelihood the baby will live and not die. More than doubles the likelihood the baby will live. So if you have a 95% chance of survival, hold on. You have here, let's just keep it easy. You have a 90% chance of survival, you have a 180% chance of survival now. That's just a misspeak. I'm not gonna grill her too much on that. I'm not gonna grill her too much on that. I mean, look, when I'm talking, I'm sure I could make a statement like that that's like wrong and just a misspeak. That happens. This is a Supreme Court dissent. If I wrote a Supreme Court dissent, this would not be an error that would be in the final draft. It would not. Incredible. Boy, uh, not a big, I don't know. Not critical. It's not critical to the opinion, obviously, but it could be fun to ribber about that because it's stupid. That's stupid. I'm not necessarily calling her stupid. I'm just saying that's a stupid mistake to make in a published dissent on a Supreme Court opinion, a landmark Supreme Court opinion that law students are going to be reading for the next 50 years, probably. And they're going to read that sentence and be like, what? What does that mean? It's fucking, maybe not. Who knows? All right. All right, let's go back to my summary. So, Sotomayor, things you can draw from it. Um, she argues for overturning precedent on the precedent that says you can't discriminate for racial justice, while simultaneously saying that we shouldn't overturn that precedent because the precedent was decided correctly. And then third, she cites things arguing for the actual benefits of a diverse student body. Not only does she not point to anything concrete, um, she's pointing to things like richness, cosmopolitanism, learning how to interact with people of different races, etc., non-measurable traits. But she also, in an attempt to quote something substantial regarding mismatch theory, she actually completely misrepresents the study, saying that mismatch theory is real and that mismatch theory actually does impact black students. So that's her dissent. Definitely enough to meme on. After I got past page 6 of how slavery is evil, I was getting a little bit impressed for like a few pages afterwards. Like, wow, maybe this is actually an opinion, and then it just descended into shit. So the majority was correct here, obviously. Affirmative action is and has always been, and the precedent has even accepted that it is racial prejudice. It is racial prejudice. That's what it is. And in the past, the Supreme Court told universities, you can be public universities that take public tax dollars, you can be racially prejudiced against white people and Asians if in the interest of making sure more of your student body is black, because that's a benefit. There's benefits that come with that. Unprovable benefits, but benefits. The This case officially removes that by saying, hey, actually, you can't be racist. You can't discriminate based on, you can't discriminate against white people or Asian people just because they are white or Asian. It's racist. So you can't be racist even if it means achieving a racially diverse student body. You can't do that. Except we're gonna end this with the issue. Right here. For the reasons provided above, the Harvard and UNC admissions programs cannot be reconciled with the guarantees of the Equal Protection Clause. Both programs lack sufficiently focused and measurable objectives warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner against Asians and white people, involve racial stereotyping against Asians, and lack meaningful endpoints. We have never permitted admissions programs to work in that way, and we will not do so today. At the same time as all parties agree, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. But, despite the dissent's assertion to the contrary, universities may not simply establish through application essays or other means the regime we hold unlawful today. A dissenting opinion is generally not the best source of legal advice on how to comply with the majority opinion. This is them calling out Sotomayor. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. The Constitution deals with substance, not shadows, and the prohibition against racial discrimination is leveled at the thing, not the name. A benefit to a student who overcame racial discrimination, for example, must be tied to that student's courage and determination, or a benefit to a student whose heritage or culture motivated him or her to assume a leadership role or attain a particular goal must be tied to that student's unique ability to contribute to the university. In other words, the student must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race. Many universities have for too long done just the opposite, and in doing so, they have concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. The judgments of the Court of Appeals of the First Circuit and the District Court from the Middle District in North Carolina are reversed. Okay. So now that we spoke about the dissent, I'm going to summarize that opinion in 1 second. First, I'm going to read some points here. Clicked on, she's all genetics may literally tell you how you may interact with somebody. Oh boy. Well, she's not wrong in that genetics may inform how you inform behavior to some extent. But this, if you're going to refer that like to blackness, we're getting a little bit into race realism then, if that's actually what was said, which is, I would not support that. I am not a race realist. I don't think, I do think that race is a social construct. And yeah, not all black people think the same. That final night, this clause here will be used as a way to circumvent this. I don't think it'll actually change much. Damn, I got an ad. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so this is the last couple paragraphs of the actual majority opinion. The first thing I read was the syllabus. The full majority opinion basically goes over that, but it establishes in a little bit more detail the end part. So what does this opinion actually do? Well, it removes the Supreme Court majority opinion removes the ability for universities to say, to give people points because of their race directly. You can't do it directly anymore. What it allows for is for universities to do this indirectly by giving people points based on them talking about how their race has impacted them. The actual opinion, not the syllabus, but the actual opinion does say right here, but despite the dissent's assertion to the contrary, universities may not simply establish through application essays or other means the regime we hold unlawful today. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. The Constitution deals with substance, not shadows. What this does, though, this does something actually. What this means is that if a person believes that a university is discriminating based on race, outside of this very narrow exception of how race has impacted them as an individual, let's say there's some kind of committees that are interested in getting some kind of like diversity status, that are interested in having a certain amount of, if the numbers turn out that like, wow, Asian people consistently are like rated as their race not impacting, but all of a sudden black people are, right? Like, if that happens, you're going to see more lawsuits. You're going to see more lawsuits, and you're going to see the plaintiffs in those lawsuits point specifically to that paragraph. What cannot be done directly cannot be done what cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. If we can't do that, what we hold unlawful today. So that helps. That helps. So they can't do it explicitly, and if there's an inkling that they are doing it implicitly, there's going to be another lawsuit, probably by the same plaintiffs here. To be frank with you, they've done a lot of them, and they're very active. So students for fair admission, which I could totally see happening. Hey, you guys said you can't do this. So when Harvard says this shit right here, the court also ruled that colleges and universities may consider admissions decisions of an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. If this smells fishy enough, I see another lawsuit. I see another lawsuit. And absent some kind of horrible tragedy, the current Supreme Court makeup is going to be what it is going to be for a little while. And I think I know how that case would end up. The final night also 74% of people, Americans, don't want race in admissions processes. Like this is just an unpopular thing to do. It's unpopular. Although when you say, to be fair, less than 20% of public universities use race as a factor, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. Maybe if it's just public. Hold on. This is saying more than 40% of universities and 60% of selective schools use affirmative, consider race to some degree in admissions decisions, according to Harvard. If it's just public, that actually could be right then. Hey, what's up, non-smoker? You guys are on the tail end of a very lengthy analysis of the opinion and the dissent in the Supreme Court decision today on affirmative action. 109 out of 554 public universities. Meanwhile, 28 states require affirmative action plans in either public employment or apprenticeships. Oh boy, that's going to be the next lawsuit. That's going to be the next lawsuit, especially after this. Yep, that's coming. Okay. All right. Thanks, Panda. How do I trigger that lawsuit? Want to send this lawsuit to me? What steps should I take? Look, I'm not encouraging. I'm not giving any legal advice. I'm not encouraging. Even though I could, if you happen to live within my state, I'm not giving any legal advice about what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying that based on my analysis of the situation and my expertise, I technically have a doctorate in the law, so this is speaking as a professional here. Okay, just wanted to throw out my credentials, really substantiate my opinion here. I don't think this is the end of it. I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see more lawsuits. I think specifically you're going to see more lawsuits when it comes to students suing universities saying, "Hey, the Supreme Court said you can't do it this way, and you're doing it this way." You're going to see those lawsuits, and then you're also going to see. You're also going to see lawsuit like affirmative action lawsuits in terms of employment, especially public employment. That's not going to be. That's going to be tough. Also, I don't know if I said non-smoker. I don't know if I said thank you for the raid. I appreciate that, non-smoker. Good shit. All right, so that's the future. So the future is more lawsuits. But what does this opinion mean right now? What are the colleges going to do? Colleges are not going to. They're no longer going to have like, oh look, we have this percentage of racial minorities. We don't. We're not going to try to hit certain benchmarks for racial minority percentages. We're not going to cut out certain students based specifically because of their race after we let them into the broader pool. None of that's going to happen. What is still going to happen is there's going to be essays that students are going to write to get into selective schools, and those essays are going to have people are going to talk about how their race has impacted them, and you're going to have racist, racially minded people like Justice Sotomayor who are going to read those papers. And once they see, well, this is a black person talking about their black experience and how their blackness has impacted their life, their brain's immediately going to shift to, I need to give this person more points because we need them here. We need to undo, just like how Sotomayor dedicated the first 6 pages of her dissent. We need to undo the suffering of slavery. Later on in her dissent, when she talks about unequal educational outcomes, we have to undo this. We have to undo racism. Society isn't colorblind. That's going to be what's going on in their brain when they're reading the paper about how black people write about how their blackness has impacted them. And that's what they're going to be saying. That's how they're going to be thinking. Maybe they might want to say it like that, but that's what they're going to be thinking. And they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I do think this. Like your racial identity has given you through overcoming challenges has made you more dynamic and made you more inspirational and more pizzazz and more charismatic." All of that's absolutely going to happen. So affirmative action is not over. Affirmative action continues. It's just it's hurt. It's lowered, right? You see kind of the same thing with like Chaplinsky, the fighting words doctrine case, where it's officially not gone, but every single case since has like constantly been like narrowing it and narrowing it and narrowing it and making it less powerful and less usable. And I think that there's going to be a lot more cases, but I don't see cases again unless there's like some crazy like happenings. I don't see cases in the future that are going to be expanding affirmative action. I think affirmative action is going to slowly decline. I think the next couple cases are going to penalize universities for doing the thing they told them not to do, and basically like dictating that states prevent them from doing the thing that this decision is telling them not to do. And then I think the final affirmative action cases are going to be saying, you can't don't talk about race, just talk about your personal achievements. Or make sure that people reading the papers are sufficiently race blind or colorblind or omit certain statements. I don't know. I don't know how you would do it, but I definitely see things going less affirmative action as time goes on than more affirmative action, especially with this ruling. So for those of you who don't like affirmative action, like myself, I think this is a good thing. I think the majority opinion was good in terms of legal reasoning, historically accurate referrals to the 14th Amendment, scientifically accurate referrals to evidence, actual evidence. And I think the dissent The dissent started out particularly weak. Sotomayor's dissent started out particularly weak in that it referenced nothing but slavery. I think it was contradictory when it said that it's not trying to overturn precedent, but then it basically it does, because the president claims that racial equity is not important when it comes to affirmative action. I think the dissent was borderline dishonest in a lot of ways, in the fact that it cited a study, pulled out the first three words of the sentence, put part of the sentence in, and left out everything else, when literally the paragraph disagrees directly with the point that she's trying to make, which is, for a Supreme Court justice to do that, if I did that in a brief, if that's actually unethical, by the way, we can get dinged for that. So if I write a brief for like in a case, and I pull out a sentence from the case to justify my argument, but the sentence is actually part of a broader paragraph that directly disagrees with the point I'm making, that's, according to the standards of like ethics in my state, I can get reported to the office of lawyer regulation for that infraction. Right? You can't do that when you're filing an official document. You cannot do that. You can't misrepresent the terms of something to a judge. So the fact that Sotomayor does it in an official landmark case in her dissent is troubling, to say the least. Very, very troubling. So I was a little bit impressed with the dissent after we got past page 6, because it actually tried to maybe do some kind of originalist interpretation, but it falls flat. Jackson Brown, I don't know 100% about Sotomayor. Jackson Brown is 100% I'm not necessarily saying she's not okay, how do I phrase this? I'm not saying she's not as qualified as somebody that they otherwise would have picked necessarily, but her race absolutely has something to do with the fact that she was picked. Biden said so directly, right? I mean, this is one of the most affirmative action presidential administrations we've had ever. He picked his vice president because she was a black woman. He picked the Supreme Court justice because she was a black woman. And is openly saying, yeah, I'm going to pick people because they're a black woman. And it's this mentality. It's this mentality that's shared among the proponents of affirmative action, and among the proponents, it's like Sotomayor, who wrote this dissent, basically saying, hey, because of racism, we got to be a little bit racist to Asians too, because it's not fair. We got to be racist against white people, because it's not fair. We have to lower the standards for non-whites and non-Asians because it's not fair. That's how, this is how, and I know I have some viewers from non-smokers audience, so I'm hopefully this doesn't turn you off completely. But this is how American leftists think, right? They think entirely in a tribal sense. Just, critical race theory, sort of tribalistic, systemic, institutional. There is no such thing as the individual. You are merely one of a group. You are subsumed into the tribal identity. Either you are part of the black tribe or you're part of the white tribe. And if you're part of the white tribe, your thoughts and your tongue and the things that you say, that's white. You are the representative of the white tribe. And the representative of the white tribe, we need some other representatives. So we're gonna, if too many representatives of the white tribe with their white viewpoint, their non-diverse white viewpoint wants to get into the university, well, that's a problem. That's a problem. So we have to exclude them. And if too many members of the Asian tribe with their Asian identity, they want to get in, no, exclude them. We need more members of the Native American tribe, which there's actually tribes in Native, you know what I'm saying. But yeah, black tribe. hard to talk about tribalism when it comes to like Native Americans because they have tribes, federally recognized tribes. So you guys know what I'm talking about. Let's look at Jamos, the that Erica Marsh tweet. We talked about that earlier. I think it's a fake account. I think it's a fake account. I don't think just the way it's like phrased is just too on the nose. No black person will be able to succeed in a merit-based system, which is exactly why affirmative action-based programs are needed. Were needed. No, that's too on the nose. I think she's trolling. I think she's trolling. A bot account that amplifies DNC. So, but like, if she's a bot account, sure, okay, I'll explain. Maybe she's not like fake in the sense of like maybe she's not set up by the Republicans, but she's definitely like not a real person. Although it really reads like this is a made by a Republican. God, it really reads like a made by a Republican to like dunk on the lefties. It really, 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 really feels like that. Yeah, I believe you. It very well could be like a DNC account. I'm just saying what it sounds like because it sounds so bad. It sounds so bad that if I was like, to try to like make a spoof account, that's the kind of shit my spoof account would make, right? Like, they obviously they can't succeed, right? It would be like, yeah, no, it's hilarious. God, it's pretty funny. I really wish it was a real person who said that though, especially like on a news program. Oh my god, that'd be so sick. Um, because ultimately this is the belief shared among like American lefties, which is they don't believe black people are individuals and they don't believe black people can succeed. They just see it as the group, and then well, is the group doing as well as this other group? Well, no. So therefore, we have to start. We have to turn up the social engineering and discrimination. Um, and I am totally talking in moral terms now. By the way, we have gone over the opinion of the court, the important parts of it, syllabus. We talked a lot about the dissent, where the dissent tried to do good but then failed and was just not accurate. Um, we talked about the data on Harvard, specifically how 2/3 of black admits to Harvard would have not gotten in without affirmative action, based at least on 2019 data. Um, we've and how legacy is like not significant. Legacy without legacy, 4.7% less white people would get in, and it actually hurts Asians. So Asians are just fucked regardless. But like how legacy's nothing. Like yeah, get rid of legacy and like it's not going to impact the racial demographics of Harvard in any significant way. So we talked about the legal element of this, but the moral element of this now. Now we can take a step back from the legal brain and we can talk a little bit about the libertarian brain. When you have a government who takes your money, and steals your money, right? Steals money from all people, and says, okay, look, we are the government, we are the enforcer of rules, and the 14th Amendment here, we're going to enforce these rules equally. We're not going to discriminate against you based on your race, except for this one area with like employment or education, where we are going to directly discriminate against you. That's different though. That's different because that's blah blah blah. No, this is just horrific. Affirmative action is horrific. It's morally wrong. It hurts people. More than a third more Asians would have gotten into Harvard without it. Can you imagine what it must feel like to be an Asian reject from Harvard, knowing that you very well may have gotten in, but somebody else took your spot who was not as meritorious as you? That's got to sting. That has got to sting. Favored in government contracts as well. Absolutely. That is racism. This is actual racism. This is not like the fucking sort of ethereal, systemic, institutional racism that you can never really pin down, but it's always there. That treats individuals as a group. It's simply part of a group. You're simply ants in the hive. No, this is actual racism. This is you as a black man um, get bonus points when you apply to Harvard. This is you as an Asian person don't get that government contract because, well, you know, you're Asian. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. And the fact that we've tolerated it for this long is also shameful. And for all you non-smoker viewers who stopped on by, the focus on racial separatism is a distraction from class consciousness. And our communist heroes like Marx agreed that we have to move away from focusing on racial identity and racial division and instead unify the proletariat, or yeah, something like that. So we can all agree affirmative action sucks. If you're tanky or if you're anybody else who's not racist. There was a question somebody asked me earlier that I never answered. And this was asked by That Final Night, if you're still here. What is your position on it for government employment? I think I basically just kind of answered that, but I'll just answer it again. So, from the legal perspective, I think it's illegal. I think it's illegal, and I think this court case is going to be used to argue it's illegal. And I think just like Brown versus Board of Education, the racism stops in schools and then it begins stopping elsewhere in a tidal wave like effect. I think you're going to see the same thing happen with employment here, where they've stopped affirmative action now in schools, at least officially, and they're going to start applying, hopefully, in the court cases that follow, which I'm sure some will. They're going to start applying that, hopefully, to government contracts as well. Because legally, the 14th Amendment should not allow the government from favoring certain racial groups on government contracts. It's bullshit. Okay, so it's illegal. Now, on the moral side of things, the legal side, by the way, for the exact same reasoning put forward in the majority in this opinion. On the moral side of things, no, the public should not be able to discriminate based on race. The public shouldn't be able to discriminate, like public entities should really not be able to discriminate on many things, right? I'm okay with it. There being very strict limitations on what the government can do. I think private individuals and private companies should be able to do what they want, generally. Just don't take government money and go do your own thing. It's not my business. But when the government, the entity that's supposed to speak for you, says, well, you don't get to have the thing we're offering because you're white, this is shameful. Absolutely shameful. Either we are all equal before the law or we are not. If you think that we are not equal, it is bad for us to not be equal in front of the law, there's no reason why a government contract should be discriminatory against a white person or an Asian person or a man over a woman. I see this all the time, by the way. This is so common. I've sued entities before, and so often the companies are like, it's run by a husband, it's run by a guy who puts the company in his wife's name because you get access to so many more grants and so much like disparately favorable treatment from public entities if you're a woman-owned business, or if you're a minority-owned business, massive benefits, and veteran-owned business actually. Now that's based on life choices and not based on racial discrimination or gender discrimination, but it absolutely happens. It absolutely happens. So I asked this of Casimir this morning. So SpaceX cannot discriminate. They are not private. Just finding anyone who takes money from the government is not private. It seems to includes almost everybody. That's a fair point. If they take government contract, because what I'm worried about is that like they're just gonna like quote unquote privatize the government, but then just essentially keep it like the Federal Reserve, right? Technically, it's private. Okay, all right, it's private, sure. I think the goal here, I guess, with SpaceX should just be like, yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. Maybe we should just like move away from companies uh, getting government money, and maybe this is a good way to do it. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm okay with reduced government spending. Um, so I don't know, dude. But no, generally speaking, definitely private institutions should not be able to discriminate based on anything. Private companies that get their money from public sources and provide a public good should not be able to discriminate when providing that public good. I think that is the test. You are providing a public good as a private entity that you are getting, like you are paying for with public money, right? So like let's say you're a utility and you're getting money from taxpayers and you're using that to build water wells and stuff. You should not be able to racially discriminate and like refuse to dig the water well near a black guy's house because he paid for that with stolen money. Um, Title 6, yeah. Yeah, public schools not discriminate based on 14A, private cannot discriminate based on Title 6. I agree. J Moss. What's crazy is that something like 30 to 40% of black students at elite universities are African immigrants who aren't even the people supposedly harmed by racist policies. That is crazy. 30 to 40%. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, I suppose, but like it surprises me that people hold the opinions they do if that's the case. Protected class. Yeah, Alley Cat, that's a good point. I think I'm pretty okay with removing protected classes as the concept and instead just putting like on public entities the standard on public entities and entities who provide a public good of you can't discriminate against people unless for any reason at all unless it is critically important in the goal of providing that service. So like if you are like a electrician and you're let's say a public electrician or whatever, I don't know, and you're tasked with like wiring up people's houses. I don't know why this would be the case, but let's just roll with me. And like you're gonna go do someone's house, but like you can't because I don't know, culturally they just like leaving their property in a dangerous condition or something along those lines. And you say, look, I can't do it not because of anything to do with like the person or whatever. I just can't do it because of, I will literally be hurt. Then I can see that. That's what you do. You remove protected classes and you simply say the public cannot discriminate. Point blank. That's how you fix the problem. And then private institutions can discriminate as long as they're not getting money from the government to provide a public good. If I check out the other decision, there's a couple other decisions today. I'm not. I have not read them. I'll be honest with you. I worked all day, and then basically immediately upon getting off work, I read through this case, and I ate some wings, and then I hopped on. So I'll read the other cases as well, the other opinions that just dropped. Um, yeah, but this is a big one. And I thought this was interesting, so I'm glad you guys stuck around. I was able to really go through, I think, the important parts of the case, the majority and the dissent. Um, there's some good stuff in the concurrences. I just don't think there's enough time for me right now to go through them all. Maybe someday soon we'll do it, just because the language is interesting. It is a landmark case. This is a landmark case, right? The Dobbs decision is landmark. This is a landmark case, and think it's going to be around for a while in terms of just people are going to be reading about it for a long time. So it's not going away. Staying around. Staying around. I do think this is a landmark case, even with that paragraph, because the reason why I think it's a landmark case is because there's going to be so many fucking lawsuits about that paragraph. Yes, that last paragraph sucks. I don't disagree with you, but there's a couple sentences in there where they're like, "Hey, just because we're putting this in doesn't mean you can't keep doing what you're doing." There is going to be lawsuits about that, and we're going to have a whole new set of litigation that's going to come specifically from that. Um, and and we already know Harvard's going to try to push the boundary as much as they can. I'm fine with discrimination and it's to coexist with free association. I agree with that, Alley Cat. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. I agree that free association needs to is important and is necessary. Discrimination is necessary to have free association, but the government does not freely associate, right? When it takes your money. So because it's not freely associating on the front end, I don't think it can then justify freely associating on the back end. You know what I'm saying? So the government and public, like the public institutions, I think are different. They're not free association. If we want to privatize more things, which I am in favor of, and then they can, if Harvard wants to stop taking government money and discriminate as much as they want, fine. I don't care if they only I don't care if they only have certain racial groups if that's what they really want to, right? That they should be allowed to do that, but not when they take government money. To the extent that they do, right? It's crazy. All right, so here's where we're at. We've we're at 3.5 hours. We have gone over the important parts of the case. I hope at the very least you guys have a little bit more understanding. Um, um, I hope you guys have more of an understanding as to this case, because ultimately that's the most important thing I wanted to get across with this one. Um, and I hope you found my analysis informative. I hope you found my commentary engaging. I and I hope you guys find that this was entertaining enough and informative enough that uh, I should do it again, because I have no problem doing this again, especially with all the incredible support. Thank you, Feder, for the bits. Thank you, everyone else, for engaging in chat. Roland, you've been very active. Ali, Kat, I mean, even before, a whole bunch of other people. You guys are all fantastic. Uh, Being active, asking questions, putting your opinions. That's Sir Leviticus. I know you've been around as well for most of this. It's just awesome, right? And it's super engaging. And yeah, and when the next big one drops, I would love to do this again. And I think with just all the support that you guys have shown, I think it'll be. I think you guys liked it. I think it justifies another one. Is what I'm trying to say. So, are there any big ones left? I'm pretty sure the next like bigger one is the is it the website one? Hold on. Yeah, the Christian wedding website designer case. That's actually probably happening tomorrow. that's that's literally happening tomorrow, and that's like the other like um, controversial one. So I don't know if I'll be able to do another one of these tomorrow. That one's a little bit less of a big one than this one, but I guess depending on what they decide, right? If they decide, well, actually, private industries can discriminate against who they want, boom, right? Holy shit! Wait a minute, right? That's going to be a full fucking stream. But yeah, we'll see what the opinion is. If the opinion's like pretty milk toast, like, well, on procedural grounds, we're just gonna like remand to the lower courts because we don't know what to do. Okay, there's not a lot there to go off of. That's what happened with the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. They didn't actually rule on the merits. They just kicked it down the road, and it was. I thought it was bullshit. I wanted to actually see the merits, but if they actually decide the merits this time, if they actually decide the merits on like whether or not artistic expression is exempt from equal like providing from private businesses having to provide like products, that's going to be a big one. That's going to be a big one because especially then what's art? Okay, now we got a whole fucking test. Maybe they're going to invent a new test. Who knows? Who knows? Thank you, Feder, for the gifted subs. Thank you so much. Good shit. Um, yeah. So I mean, tomorrow is really like the last day that they could do the wedding case. Decisions are released on Thursdays and sometimes Fridays for like a period of months. So this is the website, Opinions of the Court 2022. You can see for the term year of 2022, they've been basically been deciding cases all the way since May, April, January. Basically, yeah. October 1st, 2023. These are issued during October term, October 1st, 2023. So, we're probably going to get more. We're going to get more. So yeah, there's not going to be any shortage of drama. I'm sure that's going to come up, but tomorrow is probably going to be the big one, or I guess not as big as this one, but bigger one on the website, the uh, the Christian designer website. The question is whether or not so. There's like a Christian website designer who was told like, hey, you have to design a gay wedding website. They're like, no, we don't want to do that, which is identical to the wedding cake in Masterpiece Cake Shop, which the court kicked down the road. And this is an identical case, and hopefully they're not going to decide it just on procedural grounds like they did the last time, because I actually want to see what they have to say. You discussed the case about the court favoring a person having the right to have Sundays off. We didn't discuss that case. To be clear, the court didn't actually decide that. They the court just decided that the standard that the lower courts were using was not correct. And so they remanded the court back down and basically said, no, like the mail service has to prove to you that they didn't really have like a sufficient other alternative, like accommodation for the guy requesting Saturdays off. He was requesting Saturdays off because apparently they weren't doing that. So that was there wasn't like a super exciting opinion that came from that. They didn't make like like a firm decision. They just basically clarified a standard, and they said, "Well, we don't know what the answer to this guy is, um, but the standard you guys used was wrong, so you guys got to go back and try it again." That's basically what happened. Which it's good, like it's interesting like procedurally, but it's like in of itself, it's not going to have any major impacts on or I guess it didn't have a major impact in my humble opinion compared to compared to this case, right, about affirmative action. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much again. With all the kind support, I'm definitely we'll keep our eye on the next case, and we'll do one of these again. Kind of go over, read the syllabus, maybe talk a little bit about some of the majority opinion, some of the dissent, see how much the dissent holds water. Um, yeah, and then obviously we do a lot of panel debates here. If you're interested in that, or if you're interested in what we did today, or if you're interested in any kind of debates, any kind of panel debates, consider giving me a follow. That way you can see next time I come online, and you can see all the content that we put out here. To those of you that are active in chat, that support the channel with bits, subs, all that good stuff, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And in the meantime, what we're going to do is my good friend, Prime Kais, my understanding is very upset about the current ruling, and we are very happy. Um, um, we are very happy with this ruling, so we're going to raid on out into him to hopefully cheer him up just a little bit. Um, I know that due to racial quotas, we're not allowed on all black everything. That's okay. Uh, he has been a fantastic. He's a fantastic person, and he's been very thoughtful, and he gives us opportunities when it comes to like the reverie on Mondays. Um, so be nice, obviously, but I know that he's talking about this subject, so we're going to go ahead and raid out into Prime, and um, you can see, I suppose, what the opinion is on the other side. So yes, be nice. He look, Prime's a good guy. He's wrong politically. I really don't like his political views, and his chat can be nasty. So, but he as a person and just as somebody to work with is really really cool. He's a really cool guy. Um, so yeah, you know, you just if you don't want to deal with the menace that is his chat, just don't deal with this chat. But you get to hear how I guess people are upset about this. So anyway, thanks guys.
This is the number that you came about, like the value created. But the things that you're asking for more is not wrong or
Sure.
unfair, because you're talking about like